Happy Money in the Bank weekend, everyone. What's going on? Welcome to another Saturday edition of the Winged Eagle podcast. Boy, is this one loaded. I was thinking we might have a slow news week. We did not. Lots of stuff to get into today, as well as this week of TV and wrestling. Especially, we're going to focus heavily on Wednesday night because it was awesome with AEW and NXT. And we're going to close out the show by predicting tomorrow's Money in the Bank pay-per-view. First things first, though, I want to apologize. I think I'm going head-to-head right now with the UFC. Didn't even think about the UFC show. I don't really give a shit about the UFC, to be honest with you, but I do follow it sometimes, and I do understand that in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, we don't have any sports. So there are probably a lot of eyeballs on that show right now. So if you are an MMA fan, I hope I don't put too much of a hurting on UFC's ratings, because when they got to go head-to-head with me, they are fucked. All I can think about is Dana White's mom and a horse. So they don't want to be doing that. No, I'm kidding. But I hope that you guys are still able to watch this, whether it be live with me right now or later on, depending on what you're doing with the UFC. But I do apologize for scheduling this at kind of an inopportune time. Had I thought about that before, probably would have scheduled the podcast for my normal time of 3 p.m. on the Pacific Coast here for you guys for scheduling's sake. So anyway, I apologize for that. Hopefully it's not interfering with any of your MMA plans. And you guys can hang out and talk some wrestling with me today, because like I said, we got a ton to get into. I'll knock out all these super chats in a minute. But I just want to, of course, greet all of you and say Then I hope you're doing okay, still dealing with the pandemic, in or out of work, or depending on what your life situation is. I hope everybody's doing well out there, staying safe, and, staying positive through all of this. It's starting to become feeling a little bit normal now, just kind of being cooped up and not doing a whole lot. But still, I think we're all ready for life to eventually get back to normal, especially with wrestling. And I think we can all agree that we are sorely missing a crowd in wrestling, although we saw some good things this week. NXT and AEW just impressed the shit out of me, and I thought both shows were bookended by two really bad Raw and SmackDown shows. But Wednesday was awesome, so we're going to get into in-depth detail about that. We're also going to touch on a ton of news, including plans for SummerSlam, now officially in jeopardy. Looks like SummerSlam will not be in Boston. We've got the Revival on the Talk is Jericho podcast. Roman Reigns spoke to TMZ about his WWE hiatus. Sami Zayn is also gone from the company right now. We'll talk a little bit about that. We've got a couple of assholes of the week, a couple of douchebags, Chris Cruz and Tom Segura, to shit on. We'll be sure to do that in the introduction here as well. I'll talk about this week's Dark Side of the Ring episode on Herb Abrams, which was super interesting. We've got The Undertaker's Last Ride 5-part documentary series that kicks off Sunday, tomorrow night, after Money in the Bank. The first 13 minutes of that are available. Looks really interesting. And we'll also touch on one of the Usos are injured, and rest in peace and to Little Richard. So that's kind of what we're going to be touching on in terms of the news. Then we'll move into a couple of thoughts about Raw. We'll talk about their shitty rating that they got on Monday night. Then we'll really focus heavily on AEW and NXT, talk a touch about last night's SmackDown, even though it was a pointless show, and then we'll predict Money in the Bank. Before we sign out of here, first of all, I can be heard. I never did my sound check, right? I'm not talking into the silence. All right, you guys can hear me. All right, we're looking good. I did change my lighting in here. I got a little bit of a brighter bulb, and I've added some light, so that might look a little bit different. Hopefully it's working out, though. And yeah, it's going to be a fun one. Let me knock out some of these super chats and say hello to you guys. Like I said, going head-to-head with the UFC, don't know what kind of audience we're going to have in here today. We had a huge audience this past Monday for the Raw review, and we had a pretty good one last week for the Winged Eagle as well. Once I knock out these super chats, I'm going to tell you what you can expect from me this week, including this weekend. You got 3 days of my ass in your face. I hope you're ready for that. We've got the podcast going on right now. Tomorrow night for Money in the Bank, I'm going to be doing a live reacting to the whole pay-per-view. I have been haven't really been doing that lately in the past few months. I've preferred to do reviews because I feel like I can be more thorough in my analysis if I watch the show, make my notes, and come up and talk to you guys. But for certain pay-per-views like the Royal Rumble or like this Money in the Bank pay-per-view with 2 matches taking place simultaneously in the WWE headquarters, I think that's going to be a really interesting match to kind of react to live. So that's going to be my plan for tomorrow. Hope you guys can join me. I'll crack open some cold beers, and we will react to the entire Money in the Bank pay-per-view, And then on Monday, I'll be up here, of course, for my post-Raw review. And I also have a live stream scheduled for this week as well, which I will be giving out the details on that on social media. So stay tuned to me on Twitter for that stuff. Let me scroll all the way back up to the beginning, knock out a couple of super chats right off the bat. I see one rolling in very early from Austin Kinkle. I think that was sent in before I even went live here. Thank you very much, dude. I appreciate the $5. Do you think the hackers will get involved in the Money in the Bank match? Also, that Herb Abrams documentary was crazy. We will be getting into the Herb Abrams documentary in just a minute. I don't think the hackers will get involved in the Money in the Bank match, no. I suppose maybe they could, but you got to remember, I mean, apparently, I guess none of this is really truly confirmed, but these matches were filmed quite a long time ago. So that's why, like any last-minute decisions, Vince McMahon, for once in his crazy-ass life, he's actually handcuffed here, and he can't make a spur-of-the-moment crazy-ass decision and change his mind about something because they've already filmed all this stuff. So that's why I was kind of shooting down the rumors of, Jinder Mahal entering the Money in the Bank and winning it. I'm like, he would have had to been the plan the whole time, in which case he would have been entered into the match in a completely different way. Instead of just showing up and having a squash match one week, entering a gauntlet match the next and winning it, he would have entered the gauntlet match like AJ did as a surprise and win it if they were going to do it that way. So I just didn't really see him being that possibility. And plus, I think the hacker is something that's kind of fun to speculate on. And I think WWE likes it when they create an angle like this where it can kind of get the fans talking, speculating, all the rumors running around about who it can be. That all adds to the fun. So there's really no reason to pull the trigger on that too fast. And since we've only recently started seeing those vignettes and promos, I don't think it's time to reveal that person yet. And I guess maybe in the Money in the Bank match, he or she doesn't necessarily have to be revealed, but maybe getting involved. I don't know. I would say no on that, but considering the environment and the setting that they're in the headquarters, anything can happen. So, possible. but we still don't know what the hacker's true motivation is. It seems like most of the footage the hacker is playing, including last night on SmackDown, involved pairings and teams and tag teams. New Day, Sasha Bailey, whoever else they showed. So I don't know if that's a red herring, if they're trying to throw us off the trail of what the true motivation here is, or if there's a deeper meaning here. And that's why I do like some of the rumors and the speculation about it being like Xavier Woods. I think that would be fun. New Day's been around for a long time. You know, you can have Xavier be the hacker, maybe send Big E off on a singles run. Who knows what can happen if you end up pulling the trigger on that. I like the idea of it being Ali or Gable or both. And of course, the big name that everybody I think wants it to be is CM Punk. But I'm still voting hard no on that, because if and when CM Punk ever does return to wrestling, you got to have an audience for that. That would be such a waste for him to come back as like the hacker in the middle of this pandemic, you know, unless they drag on this hacker shit for months until everything gets back to normal and then you reveal him. But by then it might have been carried on for too long. You know, there's got to be a balance there. You don't want to pull the trigger too early, but you don't want it to last 3 years either. So I think Punk is just probably not an option, even though, you know, I think he's the one guy that most fans would want. So we'll see. We'll speculate more on that later on when we talk about SmackDown, because I will be discussing a little bit of the hacker stuff. Steve Myers, thank you very much for the $5 for a Stella. You know what? I'm drinking hardcore Dasani water tonight, but tomorrow I'll be pounding back some Stellas for Money in the Bank. So I hope you guys can join me. But thank you very much, Steve. I got to shout out those patrons in a minute as well. Devlin, thank you, buddy, for the $5 and for the glass. Appreciate it. You know, I got some glasses in the freezer. Maybe I'll bust one out tomorrow and pour some of my frosty brews in a frosty glass. That might be fun. Spaz Phoenix, good to see you as always. Thank you, brother, for the $10. Sick of Wrestling reviews for Godzilla, Kong, Skull Island, Captain America Civil War are up on my page. King of the Monsters coming soon. Cheap plug, of course. Of course, dude. You can always... actually, that's kind of an expensive plug, not a cheap plug. You can always plug your stuff over here, man. I got no problem with that. Spaz is a good dude. I wish I watched movies. None of those movies you mentioned in your message there I've ever seen. But, hey, watching your review, if I like what I hear, might motivate me to watch one of those movies. So go check out Spaz if you are sick of wrestling. Jordan Smith, thank you very much. I do have a Little Richard in my notes here. You're with me, man. When I think back to all, and there's been some good ones. I really like the America the Beautiful, you know, instead of the national anthem at WrestleManias. I think it's just kind of, it adds a different type of touch, and we've had some great performances. And I think my all-time favorite, for obvious reasons, plus I'm biased, would probably be in in Pontiac at WrestleMania 3 with Aretha Franklin. She would come back to do it again at WrestleMania 23, but the visual of her at WrestleMania 3 to me was just incredible, with her playing the piano with that sea of humanity behind her. But a close number 2 was Little Richard's performance at WrestleMania 10. Again, mostly just for the visuals. I thought it looked so good for that time, 1994. Business was so bad in WWE. They were running small buildings. It just looked low tech. It looked low budget. They were not the WWE of old. So for them to return to Madison Square Garden, WrestleMania 10, packed house, the environment looked great. Little Richard had like the choir around the ring, and Vince McMahon introduced him like he was fucking Elvis and brought him out. I really enjoyed that one at WrestleMania 10. So he doesn't have too much of a wrestling connection other than his America the Beautiful performance at WrestleMania 10. And yeah, I guess you could mention Mark Marrow. You know, Johnny B. Bad, the Johnny B. Bad character was really taken from Little Richard. But other than that, he doesn't have too much to do with wrestling, but we still wanted to give the guy a shout out here. He was a rock and roll legend, passed away, I believe, at the age of 87, bone cancer, I think it was. So rest in peace to a musical legend, Little Richard. And I was going to talk about him later, but I guess we just knocked him out right there, courtesy of Jordan Smith's Super Chat. Michael Cuomo, good to see you, man. Thank you for the $5. I just realized that the Firefly Funhouse theme has the same melody as ABC's Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Oh, as ABC's and Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Oh, yeah, it kind of does. Yeah, I think we've talked about that before. I think there's another one, too. I'm trying to think of the other song it reminds me of. But yeah, it does have a similar melody. Oh, man, I'm reading that, too. Okay, anyway, another one here from Spaz. Thank you for another $5, dude. Appreciate it. Also, AEW had old man Jake the Snake Roberts assaulting a young woman. We're going to get into all of that. Trust me. Kind of ironic. Trust me. Assaulting a young woman and the guys brawling by a Corona bin. Most distasteful Dynamite yet. I love this week's Dynamite. I did not enjoy the Jake stuff at all. I didn't notice the Corona bin. What do you mean? When they were back in like the concourse or the concessions area, there was a Corona bin there? I certainly don't think that was intended disrespectfully at all. But the Jake thing I'll kind of agree with you on, and I will have something to say about that later on. Thank you for another one there, Spaz. George Morris, good to see you again, man. Appreciate it. $2. Man, Jessica Carr is smoking hot. Jessica Carr is an awesome referee, man. We all love her. We love Aubrey, too. They both do a great job. I'm glad you're a fan of Jessica. She's a pretty chick. And thanks for another one right after that, George. $2 more. I can't stop looking at pictures of her. Okay. Well, hopefully you'll stop long enough to listen to this podcast. All right. That'll catch me up for the super chats for the time being. We got a few things to get into first, and then I'll circle back and knock out some more of those. I do want to shout out the patrons. As usual, you guys keep this channel rolling. And to the current patrons that I have right now, thank you very much to Alex Reynolds and Barry MK400, who I think is here in the chat moderating. Big Mike's Wrestling Recap, I saw you as well. Blake Moran, Brandon Yelverton, Claudio Clavadetcher, Domanian, Elwell Sr., Daniel Rodriguez, Devlin Husband, my boy, my husband, is here as well. Glenn Warnicki, who I've got a big video coming up on. He has contributed and donated to have a review done on Wrestling Society X, and I'm currently working on my live stream for Thursday. Once that's done, I'm going to start knocking out those episodes, start watching them, making my notes, and hopefully have the review up in a couple of weeks. Definitely be up in May. I just don't have a date pinpointed on that yet. Probably next week I will have that date, so stay tuned for that. And thanks again to you, Glenn. Jimmy Anderson is awesome. Hopefully you're in the chat as well. Jordan Carg, John Riffle, John Rediford, Josiah Blevins, K-Dogs Kennel, Keith Salyers, Michael Cuomo, Michael Tong, Mr. Steve, Nathan Walker, I think you're in here as well, Nick Musser, Reese Jones. Reese is the gentleman that I'm doing the live stream for on Thursday, so keep a lookout for that. Ryan Y, Scott Moss, Scotty Cura, Steve Myers, and the Double Z TV. Thank you to all of you as always, and for all of my $10 a month or more patrons and $200 or more lifetime pledges, you're shouted out as well in the description below as being a top patron. Cannot thank you guys enough. All right, BS is out of the way. Thank God, right? Let's start talking news. Got to start with SummerSlam because this is kind of interesting news coming out of Boston. So the mayor of Boston, Mayor Marty Walsh, he had released a statement saying that all large-scale gatherings like parades and festivals, concerts, etc., that are permitted by the city are suspended through Labor Day. So that's not good. Labor Day is this year, I believe, is September 7th, and that's after SummerSlam. So most news sites are reporting that SummerSlam is in jeopardy. But to me, it sounds like it's more in jeopardy. To me, it sounds like it ain't happening, because if that is the, if that's what they've done, and suspended all large-scale gatherings through Labor Day, then you can't have a SummerSlam. And it says that it goes on to say that in the interest of public health, no permit will be issued for an event before 9/7. So that is pretty clear-cut to me. WWE is going to have to probably do the same thing they did with Money in the Bank and move SummerSlam into the Performance Center, unless there are areas that they could go and maybe run SummerSlam with a crowd, social distancing, things like that, because you got to know we are going to ease our way back into things here. And when gatherings are going to be permitted again, there is going to be social distancing guidelines, I'm sure. We've heard a lot about that stay 6 feet apart type of thing. The NFL is starting to, I guess, investigate different ways that they can have audiences there. And luckily they're dealing with such large arenas. For some teams, it's not going to be a problem because everybody can go to the game and enjoy because they don't sell out the arenas anyway. But there's going to be some other football teams that, I don't know how they're going to work that out with people who have already purchased tickets. And then, if they got to keep 5 seats apart between each person, don't really know how any of that's going to work. And it's going to be a pain in the ass to regulate, I'm sure. But it certainly looks that when life starts getting back to normal in terms of fan gatherings for any sport, for any event, there's going to be some serious guidelines to adhere to. I'm pretty sure they're doing some tonight at the UFC as well. So that'll be interesting to see how that goes. But in terms of SummerSlam, looks like Boston is off the table, which sucks because they're supposed to host TakeOver. They're supposed to do the SmackDown and the Raw before and after the pay-per-view, I believe, too, as well. And there was also talk about moving the Hall of Fame that we missed to SummerSlam weekend. So I don't know. I mean, WWE's probably, making plans now to figure out what to do for SummerSlam and where to move it if they can move it. They can always just keep it in the PC like everything else has been, but maybe by the time we get to August, there will be some other places that they could run, maybe a larger venue, and maybe do some sort of a small audience. Because I'll tell you what, we're going to talk a lot about AEW here in a minute, and one thing I noticed about their show this past Wednesday, being back at Daly's Place in that more like kind of wide open setting, they had a lot of the talent, a lot more than they have on the previous set of TVs, where they were just a few of them crowded around ringside, which I still thought made a world of difference. But last Wednesday, they were all spread out through the arena. And you kind of got an idea of what it might look like if you do have to practice social distancing while going to shows. Just it'll be on a much bigger scale. But having them, spread out throughout the arena, I even saw somebody up in like the upper deck, kind of making noise up there. It was interesting. It almost felt like a show with fans, even though it wasn't. It was the closest thing that I think we've seen to that since, the pandemic and everything started. So when things get back to normal, I don't know. Yeah, I like the idea. Somebody had mentioned AEW possibly doing Double or Nothing right there, in Jacksonville, whatever the name of the stadium is. They could hold Double or Nothing there, and you could have plenty of fans there. They could all stand 10 feet apart, and when there would be plenty of room in that arena to do that. So that's something that they could actually do if they wanted to. Maybe WWE can start holding shows in big stadiums and just spreading everybody out. But I imagine the rent is going to be through the roof on something like that. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how the next couple of months go, but it's a huge bummer because I think most of us felt that prior to WrestleMania, we'd probably be back to normal by SummerSlam. It took, I think, the first month for us to realize, oh shit, probably not. So SummerSlam not being possible is not that much of a surprise. Seems very likely that we just weren't going to be ready by August, but this kind of almost confirms it, and it sucks. We're staring down the barrel of months and months more of this, and it sucks, but it's where we are. Let's move on to the Revival. I was able to check out most of Cash and Dax's interview on the Talk is Jericho podcast this past week. And I mentioned last week in the podcast, because I don't think that their appearance was announced yet, I was like, man, I cannot wait to hear what they have to say. Because Brody Lee and Moxley were extremely interesting. And the Revival have got similar stories in terms of frustration and things like that behind the scenes in WWE. So I could not wait to hear what they had to say. But you know what? I gotta fucking hand it to the Revival. They handled themselves on that podcast super professionally. They are not stupid. They are still young, and even though they have their frustrations with the company, it's still the WWE. And there's some guys like maybe a Brody Lee who I don't think will ever be back there. There's no reason for him not to place Dynamite at the front of that bridge and blow it up. Sure, he's not going back there. He has every right to do that. Fuck them, right? But the Revival, they could go on to wrestle as a tag team for the next 15 or 20 years and build a legacy for themselves. It does not serve them very well business-wise to burn this bridge with WWE. And I thought when they discussed their time in WWE, what led to their departure, why they left, and some of the circumstances surrounding that, I thought they did it in a very professional manner. They still voiced their frustrations, absolutely, but they didn't act like, bitter, crazy dickheads like some people tend to do when they leave the company. And I think a lot of fans were salivating at the idea of this interview because they couldn't wait to hear these guys trash the WWE. But I was really pleasantly surprised with how smart they were and how professional they came off. And while at the same time, letting everybody know how fucked up things kind of are behind the scenes in WWE. They touched on a lot of stuff. And the cool thing about, maybe not the cool thing, but they didn't really reveal a whole lot that we didn't know. A lot of the stuff was already leaked. A lot of the stuff was reported by Ryan Satin or Sean Ross Sapp or one of these guys. We heard many of these stories before, and they didn't really reveal anything we didn't know. Even when they talked about, they didn't mention Triple H by name, but they talked about this unnamed person that directly after a match, he said, look, things are going to start changing around here. You're going to see a change of scenery. We're going to start delegating responsibilities out, and we're going to be able to focus more on things that talent like you want. The Revival, all they wanted is for tag team wrestling to mean something. That's all they wanted. That's all they said throughout the whole podcast. Wasn't about money. If they just wanted to go there and collect a check, they could do that. WWE was offering them sweet ass deals to sit around and do meaningless shit. But they don't want to. They like and respect professional wrestling enough that they want to make a difference in wrestling. They want to be remembered. They want to provide good work, and you just can't do that when you're lost in the day-to-day nonsense of the WWE. And they expressed these concerns. They expressed these frustrations with the company. Company did nothing at all other than give them the belts, because in WWE's mind, just give them the belts. That's not really what they wanted. They even said in the podcast, it wasn't about the titles. We don't want the titles at all, because the titles mean nothing, and they don't. Every single week on Raw and SmackDown, champions are getting pinned one week after another. Sometimes champions even have losing records. How crazy is that? That's what we see now. So being champs means nothing. They just want a tag team wrestling to mean something. So when they talked about Triple H, things are going to change, they said, we feel like he truly believed that they were. But then, Vince remained so much in control that he was never able to achieve or get anything done that he had promised those guys. So they just wanted out. They also addressed the very late story that we heard right at the end of the run, or I think after they were released, about that goofy gimmick that was proposed for them. And they showed this this draw-up or this mock-up from the creative department for these outfits that they were going to wear, and they literally looked like clowns. And I, on this podcast, speculated to the validity of that story, because to me it sounded so absurd. Because when you looked at those outfits that they had those guys in, you're like, what the fuck? I mean, that right there just screams WWE is doing that just to mess with them. They're so mad that they want out of their contracts that they are going to humiliate them until they get out the door. That's kind of what most of us, I think, when we read that story, were assuming. But they kind of elaborated on that and said, and that's the thing, like, wrestling fans a lot of times take things out of context and they don't understand. We see that photo and we automatically flip out. Oh my God, WWE, that's the dumbest shit we've ever seen. That looks dumber than Shorty G. But the Revival went on to say that it was all more part of a kind of a more master plan, where, because they started teasing that, the Revival were doing funny things like putting icy hot on their balls and tripping and falling around. And so when the Revival, they were going to make a storyline basically out of the Revival wanting to be serious and, take tag team wrestling seriously. So putting them in that goofy gimmick was a way for them to show that they can take the goofiest thing and still make it good, something like that. So there was a lot more to it than, oh, we're just pissed at these guys, we're going to dress them up like two fucking McDonald's clowns and have them go out there and wrestle. There was a little bit more to it than that, and it wasn't done just to humiliate the Revival and nothing else. And I think that that's what a lot of us assumed. And so for the Revival to kind of clear that up was, to me, a relief, because when I saw those photos, I was so shocked by the ridiculousness of the look that I assumed it was fake. I'm like, not even WWE, in their most ignorant, stupid, petty way that they could ever be, I could ever imagine them dressing somebody up like that. And we've seen some crazy gimmicks in wrestling, and this to me even borderline on the insane. So I was skeptical. I questioned whether or not that was even true, or if somebody just made that shit up, and drew those designs on their own computer and submitted it to a wrestling news site, and it got reported as news. So it was right though. I mean, WWE did plan and did pitch the idea of having them look like that, but it was part of a more kind of grand scheme. So I was really pleased, and I guess I just appreciated their professionalism, because I mean, I don't know if I'd be able to be the same way. If I'm that frustrated with WWE, it might be hard for me to bite my tongue and say, this fucking company can kiss our balls. But they didn't do that. They voiced frustrations, but they stayed professional to where if and when they ever return to that company 5 years from now or whatever, they will probably be welcomed back in the door, based on how they handled things outside, because the company usually takes everybody back unless you really, burn a bridge hard. Where somebody like Brody Lee, I didn't mind him shitting all over the WWE because he wouldn't go back there if they asked him to. Plus, he's a lot older, and I don't know. This is probably going to be his final run. I can't see him going back to the WWE after how miserable he was there. Even if they called him up and say, "Hey, we're going to push you," I would, and we want to re-sign you. Come back, and we'll give you a big push. If I was Brody Lee, I'd be like, I'm going to need that in writing. I'm going to need a contract saying that I'm winning something, because I don't trust you guys as far as I can throw you. But with a team like the Revival, I'm kind of glad that they said what they said in the way that they said it. Speaking of interviews and WWE talent talking to other people, Roman Reigns spoke on his hiatus and his absence from WWE with TMZ this past week. And a lot of us were assuming when we heard the story about, and it was reported too, about Roman Reigns backing out of the WrestleMania match with Goldberg, is that, he's coming off his second bout with leukemia, could have a compromised immune system, doesn't want to take the chance, and has opted out of, wrestling and competing until this is all over. Even the craziest Roman Reigns haters, I don't think were really blaming him for that. I mean, come on, this is a very serious illness that he has, and it's not something you want to play with. And I think we all mostly, especially me, had his back. Well, he kind of clarified things, because when he did the interview, he talked about his leukemia and talked about his immune system and said that he's doing fine, and the drugs that he's taking does not compromise his immune system, which is really good news. So there really isn't any issue with his immune system. The issue was his family. And we talked about that as well. Not only, were we speculating about the leukemia, but his wife just gave birth to twin boys, and they're only 8 weeks old. So not only is Roman risking himself, but he's risking his family. But what it really came down to was just the family. He didn't want to go to Florida, travel, be around all these people, potentially contract the virus, pass it on to his 8-week-old kids. Who the fuck can blame him for that? And there's been some speculation with us and WWE that he's got some sort of heat. Last Monday on Raw, I forgot to mention this in my Raw review, they edited him out when they were going through like the countdown of the greatest Money in the Bank moments ever. They edited him out of that, of WrestleMania 31, which is strange. They made it seem like Seth Rollins pinned Brock Lesnar and not Roman Reigns, which is weird. Why? But to me, that doesn't make sense. To me, that's not evidence of heat, because if Roman had heat, they would want to show him being pinned. So I think a lot of fans were like, oh man, they're fucking burying Roman Reigns. I'm like, nah, I think, because after like Hogan and Savage left the company, WWE replayed the Ultimate Warrior beating them at back-to-back WrestleManias over and over and over. So I don't think it has. I think that's just kind of a coincidence there, but there have been some rumors that Roman's got heat because we heard about the internal memo. Don't mention Roman Reigns' name. Don't bring him up on commentary. That can mean one of two things. WWE's mad at him, and so they're like punishing him, or they're just trying to keep his name out of conversation so when he does return, it can be a big deal. Based on WWE's treatment of Roman Reigns in the past, I think it's the latter. I think WWE wants to make his return a big deal. I think a lot of fans would like to think that he's got some heat, but you got to remember, these same fans that are probably so eager to say, WWE's bearing Roman Reigns, those very same fans say that WWE and Vince McMahon suck on Roman Reigns' balls every day. So they need to make up their mind which side of this fence they're going to be on here. So I'm going to speculate, I'm going to guess, and I'm not saying I'm right, but I am not buying into the fact that Roman Reigns has serious heat with the company. Maybe Vince is mad. We heard a report that his view and his opinion on Roman Reigns changes from day to day based on his mood. I think a lot of these stories about Vince are sensationalized a little bit, to be honest with you. I know Vince is crazy. I know he's out of touch. I know he makes some balls out, crazy, dumbass fucking decisions, but we've never heard too many stories in the past of Vince McMahon being downright cruel or insensitive to somebody in terms of like their regular life. When they have to do something, when they need time off or whatever, Vince is a lot of times there for them. We've always talked about we've heard from so many wrestlers who talk about Vince in like a pseudo father figure type of way. He's always there to talk. He's always there to listen, to give advice. And, to his top talent, the talent that he has time for, he always has time for them, kind of thing. So I'm sure Roman and Vince have had discussions. I don't think it was like where Roman is like, Vince, I don't want to wrestle. And Vince is like, God damn it, Roman, I need you there. Fuck your family. I really don't think that conversation took place. So if I had to guess, my heart of hearts, my gut instinct tells me that WWE's cool with Roman Reigns' decision. They might not like it in terms of TV because they want him on TV, especially with the ratings in the shitter right now. In Vince's mind and in WWE's management mind, they probably think, if Roman was here, the ratings would be a lot better, when it wouldn't matter at all. So I say no. I vote no that Roman Reigns has heat. I just don't see it based on how he's been treated in the company. For them to turn on him for something like this seems awfully stupid and petty. He was able to bounce back for the most part from the wellness suspension, right? So he came back from that, and I think it was a full year before he ever got back to the world title again, prior to relinquishing it to leukemia. So he seems to not have that type of status or heat in the company that would get him in so much trouble for this. This is something I would expect. This is a story I would expect to hear from like a mid-card talent that's already in the doghouse or something like that. So I personally don't think that Roman has any heat with WWE. I think a lot of that is kind of made up, but who knows? Maybe he does. But when you listen to his reasoning here, what kind of sick, evil son of a bitch would have a problem with Roman Reigns saying, no, fuck this. I'm not going to risk my life. I have 2 8-week-old babies at home, and I'm not doing it. I think as a father, any of us would do that. So plus I'm also glad that Roman is in a spot in the company where he has the power to do that. Because if you're a lower card guy that somehow survived all of these releases on April 15th, and you're like, damn, I'm glad my name's not in that. If you're someone with 2 twin boys, maybe that's something you're scared to do. Shit, I want to take care of my family, but if I opt out of my matches here that I'm booked for, when they do bring me back and when things do get back to normal, they're never going to use me, or they're just going to, or they might just outright release me or something. If I was one of those guys, maybe I'd be a little bit worried. Although I would like to think WWE would still respect that request and that decision from anybody, regardless of the status on the card. But for a guy like Roman, he's got the power to do that. He's a star. WWE cannot erase him. I've heard a lot of people say that too. WWE's erasing Roman Reigns. You can't erase Roman Reigns. And that's WWE's own fault. They have smeared him and shoved him up our asses for the past 5 years. Unless you want to erase the entire 5 years, it's going to be really hard to speak on the recent history of WWE without bringing up this guy's name, considering how dominant he was. So my gut tells me that he's not really in any trouble with WWE, and when he's back, he'll be back to the same old Roman, doing the same old Roman things, winning the same old Roman matches. And probably, because the Universal title situation is so strange right now on SmackDown, probably find his way back to the title as well, if I had to guess, but we'll see. Before we get into the next piece of news, let me just scroll back up here and make sure I didn't miss any other super chats or anything like that. Decent audience in here, a couple of hundred people. Devlin, I got to hit you there. And was there somebody else? George Morris. Oh, I got your Jessica Carr messages there. And thank you for another $5 there, Devlin. Appreciate it. Bring SummerSlam to Hawaii. We got beaches and stuff. Hell yeah, SummerSlam in Hawaii. Not much of a better place. Me, you, and Barry can all go to fucking SummerSlam together. That would be sweet. Speaking also of current WWE wrestlers not around, Sami Zayn's been absent, and Sami Zayn is the Intercontinental Champion. So the story is that Sami Zayn has also opted not to work. He doesn't want to work, doesn't feel comfortable with the virus or whatever. I guess that's what the word on the street is. However, he's currently the Intercontinental Champion, and the last report that I was reading online from a couple of different various news sites kind of saying that there's no plan for him to be back anytime soon. And Sami's another guy, while he's not at Roman Reigns status, Sami kind of has his, he has his own values too. And I think Sami Zayn is the type of guy that he doesn't care if it's going to cause him heat in the WWE. If he doesn't feel comfortable with doing something, he's not. And again, this goes back to how WWE uses some people. I think if WWE treated Sami Zayn maybe a little bit better, I mean, I know they treat him well. He's on TV a lot and shit, but we can all agree that he was better in NXT when he came to the main roster. Even when a lot of people were behind him, WWE never seemed to pull the trigger on him. He fell in the same category as Cesaro and so many others that had the potential, did kick-ass shit in NXT, but when he got to the main roster, just nothing was happening. So, he's not a guy that's going to risk his life over a company that he doesn't, he's probably made and saved his money, and his time in WWE hasn't been that eventful. Some of us, sometimes when we see Sami Zayn on TV, we're wondering what the hell we just watched. The obstacle course shit with Bobby Lashley and the sisters, and back in, being a heel and all the crazy shit he was doing. His feud with Kevin Owens back in the day was fun, and his relationship with him, but his time on the main roster just has been probably a letdown for most, I would say, considering where he was and what he achieved in NXT and what he achieved prior to coming into WWE as El Generico. And now here, it's just kind of like, sometimes he shows signs of potential, or not potential, but possibility that maybe they could do something meaningful with him. I've actually liked the Artist Collective, the little faction that he was heading up. He kind of took on a managerial role, wasn't really in the ring at all, backing up Shinsuke Nakamura and Cesaro. And then out of nowhere, wins the Intercontinental title without really even being in the ring much. And now he's still champion, and he's not planning on coming back anytime soon. So I'm curious how WWE is going to handle this if they have to crown a new champion. Are they going to strip him? Are they going to make something up? Oh, he refuses to come to work. I mean, they're not going to tell the truth. They're not going to tell the truth. They're not going to say Sami Zayn feels uncomfortable performing in the COVID-19 stuff. They're not going to say that out loud on TV. So just like they haven't for Roman Reigns, they haven't said a word about him. So what do they do here? If Sami Zayn didn't have the Intercontinental title, it'd be no big deal. Just keep him off TV, no big deal. He won't be missed. But with the title, you got to get that belt back there. So maybe they can convince Sami to come back to TV for 1 week and drop it. Then he can go back home. Or, they're going to have to create a reason, maybe even film something off-site, where he gets injured or something like that, or create a storyline reason for the title to be held up in a battle royal or a tournament or something like that. Because you basically had the same thing happen with the Universal title, but they just passed it right over to Strowman. You're doing the same thing with the Cruiserweight title right now because of Jordan Devlin. So now you're going to do this with another title belt. Oh, and the tag team title situation got fucked up at WrestleMania because of The Miz. So there's a lot of just up and downs with these titles, so they need to get on secure, stable people. So I'm curious how WWE is going to handle the Sami Zayn situation. I don't know if he's going to have internal heat for the with the company for some of the other things he said, because Sami Zayn has got a little bit of heat with the fans right now, which I don't really understand why. Basically, Sami voiced his opinion on some of the crazy things that we've been seeing in the world, in society, in this country, in terms of the protesting, and these people. A mild inconvenience is seen by these people as a loss of freedom, and they're showing up draped in American flags, screaming in the face of cops. These same cops that they defend every time they gun down some poor black kid, they say Blue Lives Matter. If they just would have done what the cops said, that wouldn't have happened. He wouldn't have gotten shot. These very same people are standing in the face of policemen and screaming in their face, spitting in their face, throwing shit at them. Maybe they weren't so pro-police as they were anti-black. Just a thought. So basically, what Sami Zayn really did is he basically called a country that is full of idiots a bunch of idiots. He really wasn't, and I think that upset a lot of people, that upset a lot of Americans. How dare you talk about that? And I understand that. It's kind of like defending your team. If somebody says your favorite football team sucks, no, they don't. Even if they suck, you're always going to defend them and stuff. So there was a lot of fans very upset at Sami Zayn for his comments, but what did he really say? If you're going to say, oh, this Tom Segura shit that I'm going to talk about in a minute, oh, people are too sensitive. You shouldn't worry about what some guy thinks about professional wrestling. Okay, fine. I guarantee you those same people are livid at Sami Zayn. Guarantee you. The same people livid at Sami Zayn are the same ones blowing off what Tom Segura said. How fucked up and irrational is that? You know what I mean? Sami Zayn wasn't being disrespectful. Sami Zayn wasn't really insulting people. He was saying, I am baffled and just amazed by the jaw-dropping stupidity that exists in this world. That's all he said. He's right. He's 100% right about that. There are some dumb fucking people in this country. There's dumb people all over the world, but they're really dumb people in this country. And when you have people really feeling like their freedom is threatened because you have to wear a mask, I'm going to boycott Costco. They make me wear a mask. They can't make you wear a mask. If you don't wear a seatbelt, you get a ticket. Are you boycotting cars? What is so hard about putting one of those things on your face in the interest of public safety? People are so up their own asses. People are so self-fucking absorbed about their stupid, personal, imaginary bullshit American freedoms that they have to drape themselves in American flags and Trump hats and go out there and scream in the face of authority who is trying to keep everything together and keep everything organized, like the police, these people that they defend left and right. Every time they murder somebody, they get defended by these people who are now screaming in their face. So I don't think Sami Zayn was really out of line for calling out the inconsistency and the craziness that exists in this world. That's all he did. He didn't call Americans the R word like Tom Segura did. He didn't do any of that. He was basically, his thoughts were more on disappointment. He wasn't trying to be more insulting than he was just trying to voice his disappointment. That's the way I feel. I'm embarrassed of this country sometimes about the fucking morons that live here and that are so prevalent, everywhere. It's hard, it sucks, and I know every country has to deal with that. If you're in Australia or wherever you are, I'm sure you deal with the same thing that we deal with here. A bunch of stupid people doing a bunch of stupid shit. But for some reason, Sami Zayn ruffled a lot of feathers, and now fans are angry at him. And all of a sudden, now he sucks. I saw that a lot too. I never really liked Sami Zayn. You notice that always happens anytime somebody gets pissed. Seth Rollins did the same thing. Last year when he was running his mouth on Twitter. All of a sudden, I never really liked Seth. He's not that good in the ring. You can't just argue with the point. You have to now attack. Oh, he wasn't very good. You loved him. Don't fucking bullshit. So anyway, I kind of crack up at that. Sami Zayn never thought he was very good. I'm like, yes, you did. Fucking liars. Anyway, I don't really have an issue with what Sami Zayn said. Didn't really think he was out of line at all. But when you combine that with the fact that he's gone, I don't know how WWE feels about him. I don't know if he's got any heat there internally and how they're going to handle his exit and how they're going to handle the Intercontinental title. If they're going to shit on him or bury him or whatever, who knows? He doesn't seem to care. He's a guy with a championship belt right now that still is like, no, I'm not coming to work. I'm not doing it. I respect people that stand up for themselves like that. I was really kind of hoping Daniel Bryan would be one of those guys too that say, no, I'm not going to do that. Kind of like about going to the Saudi Arabia and stuff. So I don't know what the deal is with Sami, but I'd like to see him back one day and hopefully get back to some sort of status in the company that's not just completely useless. So anywho, that's my thoughts on Sami Zayn. Let's move on to some real douchebags. Real big douchebags. Since I just mentioned his name a minute ago, let's talk about Tom Segura. Now, normally, this is something that I wouldn't even care about at all. And you guys saw what was going on with this Tom Segura guy right now. I've never even heard of him. I guess he's a comedian. wasn't aware really who he was. And he was on a shitty podcast with his female co-host. And I think Ryan Satin had originally posted it on Twitter saying, hey, wrestling fans, just thought you should see this. Tom Segura calling wrestling fans retards and saying that wrestling is fake and it's the dumbest shit ever. And how stupid can you be to believe this and all that. Just went on like a little 2-minute rant on professional wrestling. Now, normally, if any celebrity or comedian or anyone shits on wrestling, I could give two shits. I didn't even say anything about this on Twitter because I didn't care. I'm like, who cares if somebody like makes fun of wrestling? Everybody makes fun of wrestling. We as wrestling fans, how much shit we have to put up with from people shitting on wrestling and making fun of it and how stupid it is when they have no fucking clue what it really involves, you know? So Tom Segura using the broad stroke term of fake is just the word that everybody uses. I'm not one of those fans that gets upset at the F word, at the fake word, because I know what they mean by fake, you know, because wrestling fans feel the need to immediately jump in and defend, you know, it's not fake, it's predetermined, but the falls and the bumps are real and the blood is real and the violence is real and all that kind of stuff. We get that, but the word fake is just always going to be used. So I've kind of given up on if somebody ever does bring up professional wrestling or a non-fan and they use the word fake. I don't even get uppity about it anymore, because I think even now, I think most people that don't watch wrestling and know it's fake, I think the message has been passed along to them by now that, yes, it's fake and predetermined, but you still get hurt. But that's not going to stop them from using the word fake, because they are fake fights. They are simulated combat. You know, that's just the word they're going to use. So I've almost like given up on being sensitive about the word fake. But I think it's crazy ironic that he uses the R word, just a word that nobody should really be using right now. You know, you still hear a lot. I still see grown ass men calling other people fucking retards, like you're in the 6th grade or something, you know, because I've got to admit, full disclosure, I was guilty of using that word when I was in fucking grade school, you know? So to see grown men still not be able to move past that and not be able to use any sort of creative brain power to come up with a different insult or a better insult or a modern insult, you know, but even people who use that word, it's not like I even give a shit, you know, it's like, it's, you know, freedom of speech. I don't fucking care. You know, if there's a comedian that's, you know, belting out racial slurs and shit like that all the time, I'm just going to choose not to listen to them, you know? So he's the one that kind of called out wrestling fans here, but I find it ironic that he's referring to wrestling fans as mentally challenged, dumb, stupid, ignorant, whatever other word you want to use. He's referring to us as those people. However, he's the one that actually believes that people in 2020 still think wrestling is real, because that was part of his insult. I can't believe people go to these shows. He reminded me of John Stossel, to be honest with you, because John Stossel was saying the same thing. The whole reason why that expose was launched, because it personally bothered him that people were in the audience enjoying that form of entertainment. And he thought, I can't believe all these people think it's real. I think even back in 1985, people knew it was bullshit. So for this guy to think that's just what kind of an uninformed opinion and uninformed understanding he has of professional wrestling, that he thinks that people are going to these shows and watching them as real fights and watching them as real sport. Pretty ironic that he's calling us dumb, because that's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard. You're an idiot, Tom Segura. You are the mentally challenged one. You are the moron. You are the fuckface. You are the douchebag. You stupid, ugly piece of shit with a shitty podcast. So normally I wouldn't care about this. I wouldn't even care about this. But he was so deliberate and direct with his insults and so fucking offensive. Fuck you, dude. Oh my God. And he's got that stupid face, scary lips, Captain Scary Lips. How you tasting my hairy shit, Tom Segura? You getting a big mouthful of Greg Morgan's world famous beef stew? How's it going down? Kind of spicy, right? Douchebag. Hate you. Anyway, I hope you're watching, Tom Segura. Big F you to you. Nobody likes you. Nobody gives a shit about your opinions. I just thought he was a little bit over the top in his assessment of wrestling fans. Like, what's his problem? You know, what's his problem? And why is he so stupid that he thinks that wrestling fans like us are going to shows thinking that we're watching real fights? Every single person in the audience, including little kids, know what's up. They do. They do. I knew what was up. Even back when wrestling was still trying to be passed off as real, I knew at age 7 that it wasn't. So who's this guy talking about? You know, this guy can kiss my ass. Anyway, fuck you, Tom Segura. Let's move on to another douchebag. We got another colossal, monumental douchebag, former WCW announcer Chris Cruz. Remember this dumbass? For some reason, I forgot he existed. Didn't even know what ever happened to him. So this fucking pile of dog shit. He files a complaint to the Maryland Athletic Commission over the Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega match way back at Full Gear. Now, we had heard about that complaint months ago, I think, because I remember this coming out a while ago. Well, it took a while to get a ruling, and the ruling is now in. And AEW was actually fined $10,000 by the Maryland State Athletic Commission for the lights out match between Moxley and Kenny Omega. And according to the commission, Maryland prohibits wrestlers from deliberately lacerating themselves or their opponents or introducing human or animal blood. Now, we talked about this when this broke, because I remember we laughed about the animal blood part. Introducing human or animal blood into the match, none of which happened in that match. Moxley and Omega both bled in the bout, which featured barbed wire, spiderweb, broken glass, a mousetrap, board, and more. So, I guess the argument here is they were blading, they were opened up hard way, but they definitely did intend to have blood at the same time. So what's crazy here is that the motivation behind this, like, what the fuck is Chris Cruz's problem? Where the hell has he been? Why does he care to single out AEW here specifically for doing what all wrestling companies do in every state in every year? Like, this has been going, like, that match was crazy. Don't get me wrong. That was a crazy, hardcore, over-the-top match at Full Gear, but nothing crazier than we've really ever seen. I mean, all this is going to do is make AEW not go back to Maryland again. And this douchebag's basically his reasons for doing this, he posted them on his Facebook page. And he doesn't really provide any true motivation other than it seems like it personally bothers him, because in his statement, he took little digs at AEW fans. And what this sounds like to me is this is a grown-ass man that looked like he was about 60 years old back in WCW. I don't know how old the piece of shit is now. But this seems like somebody that is behaving like an 18-year-old wrestling fanboy on Twitter who gets so upset about the fans' behavior on the other side that he now has to go out and try to deliberately harm, that company or something. So it seems like he was almost motivated to do this by the wrestling fans that he doesn't like, by the wrestling fans that annoy him. He joked about the AEW fanboys getting all mad. Like, what the hell, dude? Like, what the hell's this guy's problem? Will somebody please find this guy and punch him square in his face, please? Shouldn't be too hard. Stiff breeze will knock this piece of shit down. So I don't understand why he would deliberately target them and be the cause of this. Now, at the end of the day, this isn't going to be a huge deal for AEW, I wouldn't assume. He's acting like it's some big victory. This is going to be an embarrassment to professional wrestling and an embarrassment to AEW. He acts like he's accomplished some big thing here. It's $10,000. It's $10,000, and they're probably not going to go back to Maryland anymore, to do any more matches. This is nothing new. Wrestling has been doing this forever, and it's such a bizarre story because a couple months ago when we first heard his name, I'm like, Chris Cruz? Why? I just never thought in a million years you would put that group of words together to form a sentence. Chris Cruz gets mad about a wrestling match, files a complaint, to the athletic commission, and then they, took that and went from there and ended up fining AEW $10,000. For somebody like Tony Khan, drop in the bucket, but a huge inconvenience and just a shitty thing to do. If I'm Tony Khan, I'm furious when I'm writing that check, to $10,000. Maybe write an extra $10,000 to somebody else and go take out that fucker. I'm kidding. That's a little bit extreme. But I think it's just a highly douchey thing to do because it came out of left field. He provides no real motivation for doing it. That's the thing. That's the thing that bothers me. He tries to pretend that it's out of the benefit and the safety of the wrestlers, but goes on to then shit on professional wrestling, and then it's meaningless and doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things anyway. So which is it? Chris Cruz. Oh my God. I'd like to take you on a cruise and kick your ass overboard. My God, I don't know what that's a situation and a story that almost just annoys me more than anything else. It's not a big deal. We're going to forget about it in 3 weeks. AEW will pay the fine. We'll never hear Chris Cruz's stupid name uttered again. But why he went out of his way to do this and wondering, what he's going to try to do in the future, if he's going to be watching closely every single wrestling show and file complaints, I would love to see him run into WWE's lawyers. That's a battle I wouldn't want to fight. So he seems to have it out for AEW for whatever reason. I don't know what's crawled up his ass about AEW. To me, based on his Facebook posts and his explanation, he's mad at the fans. But to use that as motivation to do this, I highly recommend getting a life. I highly recommend getting a life. Because what a waste of time. What a waste of your time to consume yourself and concern yourself with that and spend the time to do it for what? To make some stupid statement and get a ton of heat? I mean, how many people I haven't looked at many of his Facebook responses, but I would assume they're mostly negative. Even people that hate AEW, even people that are closet AEW haters that won't even admit it, but you know they are, I think even they would think that this guy's a douche just for targeting them for some random reason like that. If he was doing this back in the day to ECW, he'd have people from Philly finding out where he lived and paying him a visit. You know what I mean? So to me, it just seems like a douchey, stupid thing to do. And Chris Cruz and Tom Segura can suck on my ass, my juicy ass. Speaking of crazy people, let's get into Herb Abrams. Let me cruise back up here, bust out a couple more of these super chats before we get into the next order of business. And then eventually, we will get into wrestling here. I got about two or three more things to talk about, and then we'll jump into a couple of notes on Raw, and then the big Wednesday night that we all witnessed on Wednesday. Just making sure I'm not missing anything. His last couple of weeks I've missed a couple. There's one from Stone Cold. Thank you, brother. Appreciate the $5. I knew it was scripted when I was a kid. My dad got me into wrestling and said it was like a circus. They put on a show and try to entertain you. Yeah, I mean, a lot of us, I mean, it didn't happen like that for me, but I knew at an early age I was smartened up like almost immediately, kind of in a similar way to yours, but different at the same time. It was never, it was never really something that anybody would go on believing past a certain age, especially for an age like me. By the time I was 10, 11, 12, now we're in the mid late 80s, and things were really cartoony by that point, and Hulk Hogan and shit like that. And there's a few years later, we have The Undertaker, and dead guys sitting up and impervious to pain. Who the fuck believes this? So the fact that Tom Segura thinks people believe it makes him dumber than the people he's insulting. And that's kind of the point of my little rant on that dumb bastard. Anyway, let's talk about Herb Abrams real quick. I've only been giving you guys little mini reviews of the Dark Side of the Ring series since they started. I did a full review on Benoit at the beginning of the season, and I'm going to do a full review on Owen in 2 weeks at the end of the season. So when the Owen Hart documentary airs on that Tuesday, I'll watch it and I'll record a review of it and have it up on the channel the following day on Wednesday. So that'll be my plan. You'll get a full review on Owen Hart, just like you got for Chris Benoit. But for the ones in between, I figured I would just save my thoughts on those for the podcast. So Herb Abrams was a funny story. I remember his death a lot. I remember seeing a lot of the UWF advertisements back in the day and some of their pay-per-view stuff. And I remember reading all about who he was and his death and how he died and all that shit. So all of my info and my knowledge, though, of Herb Abrams was done primarily by reading, like back in the day. So I only kind of knew the bare bones of his situation. I knew he was crazy, and I knew he was a complete cokehead that blew a lot of money and loved hookers and shit like that. But they did elaborate on some stuff about him that I didn't know. And I thought it was a really done documentary, even though, it ends in a sad way. It ends in his ultimate death. It was almost like a funny, more lighthearted one. They somehow were able to make an entertaining, lighthearted show about somebody who clearly had very dark problems. This is a guy that was just smothered in Vaseline and cocaine, and he's got 3 hookers around him. That's funny. He lived a funny life. So he clearly had issues. He clearly had problems with drugs and everything like that. But man, he lived life to the fullest, it certainly sounded like. And despite his craziness, despite his ridiculous goals that he set for himself, opening up the UWF, which is not the Mid-South version is what Bill Watts had. But I don't remember. I guess the trademark either expired or maybe he never filed it. But the UWF trademark was open, allowing Herb Abrams to take it and start the UWF. And that's when, he brought in so many of those big name stars from the past. And according to the documentary, and this is something I didn't know about him, he was obsessed with Vince McMahon and putting the WWE out of business. Even though he had no chance of doing that, it was his number one goal. And I've said that for so many years. It's the reason why TNA is in the shape it's in right now, and it's the reason why WCW died. Because they were too obsessed with WWE. When you do that, you die 100% of the time. So that right there to me was silly, that he was so adamant about being better than them just because he was a short little cocky guy with a huge ego and a ton of money. It's going to take a lot more than that to take down somebody like Vince and that family. You think Vince McMahon, is being found in his bed covered in Vaseline and cocaine with 6 hookers around him. Vince doesn't do drugs. He might have some hookers here or there. Wouldn't be surprised, but drugs isn't really in Vince's wheelhouse, and he's got a much better handle on wrestling. It's been in his family. He's not just some crazy maniac that just up and decided, I want to take a bunch of money and start a wrestling company and put the WWE out of business. Doesn't work that way. So that was almost comical to me that he actually thought they had a chance. Some of the talent they interviewed for this also, like Mick Foley, he was like, I felt like he was onto something here. And I think, his brand of wrestling definitely had a place, but and could have been that, could have been that like wacky alternative to WCW and WWE. I think it definitely had a place for that. But when you aspire to be not only as big as the WWE, but bigger, you're setting unreachable goals for yourself. And you don't have the infrastructure for that. You don't have the talent for that. You don't have the cooperation for that. They talked about some of the pay-per-view events that were complete clusterfucks. They dropped the ball so many times on marketing and advertising and getting fans into the arena. They booked the MGM Grand in Las Vegas and had 36 people there. They didn't have the vision. They didn't have the creative and business direction that the WWE did. And he was completely delusional in his thoughts. And it was probably a lot of coke-filled and fueled, I should say, thoughts to actually think he had a chance for that. But his story was told brilliantly. I loved the line, even though I don't really like B. Brian Blair very much. I liked the line that he said, or when he said, Herb Abrams died doing what he loved to do, cocaine and hookers. There is no better just overall message of that entire documentary than that. That was the best, most well-delivered line of the entire 45-minute show. I loved it. I got a huge kick out of his death. It got a little sad at the end when they talked about how he died, and his one, I forget his name now, the one really close business partner friend that he had, and to see him kind of tear up a little bit. That was his friend. And that's one thing they did say about Herb Abrams is everybody did like him. He was a fun-loving guy, could be fun, could be kind, could be generous. For a guy that was, so coked out of his mind, you didn't hear too many stories about him being a tyrant or, chewing people out or going crazy or being, walking around, with his dick out, pushing and shoving his way around and stuff and exerting his power. He wasn't like that. He was definitely egotistical and stuff, but at the same time, he was a generally well-liked person, even though he clearly had issues. So this is one of the more entertaining Dark Side of the Rings that we've seen. I really had a good time watching this one. As a matter of fact, I even think the Brawl for All was sadder than this, because this one ended in a tragic death. The way he died, jumping out the window and then dying in police custody like that, that's a sad ending. But when you compare it to the rest of his life, it's like a fitting ending, where the Brawl for All seemed legitimately sad. You see what Bart Gunn has become, what wound up happening to Dr. Death Steve Williams and his potential run in the company and his death and, all of the lives that it fucking ruined. That particular episode, I think, was sadder than Herb Abrams, which is a tribute to what kind of crazy ass life that guy lived. So anyway, that was one of the more fun Dark Side of the Ring. I think it even drew good numbers as well. So we've got one more left. We've got Road Warriors coming up this Tuesday, and then 1 week from Tuesday, it's the big one. It's the big one we've all been waiting for. Owen Hart. It's going to be really interesting to see Martha on there, what she has to say. It's probably going to be eye-opening. We're probably going to hear a lot of things we weren't expecting, but it's also going to dig up a lot of old wounds, which sucks, especially when we're coming up on the 21-year anniversary of Owen Hart's death. As a matter of fact, I think the episode airs on his birthday, which sucks. And then he would just die. He would die just a few days later at Over the Edge. So anyway, a couple of weeks from now, we got a big one coming up on Dark Side of the Ring. I also want to mention I've got Nikki Bella in my notes here, and I have not read these stories from her memoir. Her memoir was published. I think it was co-written by Bree, and she reveals apparently 2 previous rapes. Sexual assaults, rapes at age 15 and 16. Age 15 was by a high school friend. Age 16, she was drugged by a college guy. She said she kept it quiet. She hid it from everybody, including her mother, and is now choosing to reveal this in this memoir. So that is horrible to hear. I'm not going to question, whether it happened or not. I think it would be silly to make something like that up. So if she's carried that with her whole life and she's had to deal with that, I feel for her a lot. I've met Nikki Bella. She's been into my restaurant a couple of times. She's great. I know I've said some pretty funny things about her in the past as well, but I've never disliked her or anything like that. Even her wrestling ability, I found myself defending Nikki Bella in the ring and stuff. The fans that were like flipping out and shit about her. So I've never really had any sort of deep hatred for Nikki, even though I absolutely vomit at the concept of a show like Total Bellas. Never will watch it. Don't like that it exists. Hate those type of shows. And every time I see a commercial for them on Raw or SmackDown, I immediately start freaking out because I hate that stuff. But Nikki Bella, if she has been carrying this around, that's got to be a lot for a woman to carry around. You know, to be raped like that and now reveal all this to the world is, you know, probably therapeutic and terrifying all at the same time. So best wishes out to Nikki Bella and how she chooses to deal with that going forward. And I'm sure she feels a lot better now that it's out. So I just wanted to at least mention that. And, you know, if we find out more details about it, maybe we'll talk more about it in the future. But just want to know that we all love Nikki here on the channel. And we got your back, girl. We also got to talk, well, we're not going to talk about it yet. We're going to talk about it in detail in a few days. But on Sunday, The Undertaker's Last Ride documentary kicks off. It's a 5-part series documenting, I guess, his final days in the WWE. To me, it looks like WWE's answer to ESPN's The Last Dance that's going on right now with the Chicago Bulls. I've watched, I think, 3 out of those 5 episodes, and they're great. So this one is really focusing heavily a lot, I think, on his final match, or what was supposed to be his final match at WrestleMania 33 with Roman Reigns. Now, I have not seen the first 13 minutes. Apparently, WWE made available the first 13 minutes of the documentary or something. A lot of you guys have seen it and told me about it. Have not seen it yet. I'm just going to wait and watch it in its entirety when it starts on Sunday. But one of the things that was revealed apparently in this documentary, and something that I've given Undertaker a hard time for, is that apparently it was all Vince, you know, Vince McMahon who wanted to bring him back. He claims in the documentary that he went into that match at WrestleMania 33 with Roman Reigns thinking that was his last match. And even though he said the match sucked, he didn't like it, it was a bad performance, it was still, and I remember, you guys remember, the match was bad, but to me it wasn't about the match. I didn't even give a shit about the match. They could have a Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior Halloween Havoc level match, and I wouldn't have cared. To me, it was about the ending. To me, it was about the symbolism of The Undertaker taking off his gear, folding it up, leaving it in the ring, and, you know, descending down into the ramp. Goodbye to the fans. We were all crying at home. I mean, that was the end of a long career. You know, nobody rode longer than The Undertaker did. To me, it was a fitting end. You know, he went out on his back to the top guy at the time in the main event of WrestleMania. What else can you do? You know, and a lot of people said, well, he never said it was his last match. I'm like, you don't do all that. You don't bump 2 title matches to the mid card. You don't give a legend the main event. You don't have him basically symbolically tell the wrestling fans, tell everybody in that arena that night and everybody at home that this is his last match by removing his gear and leaving it in the ring. Even the ring crew, which is one of the most touching parts of the whole thing, when they broke down the WrestleMania set, his gear stayed in the ring the whole time. It was the last thing they did, just out of respect. You know, to me, that was all I needed for The Undertaker. But for some reason, I guess Vince is the one that kind of brought him back. And he's wrestled, 8 or 9 matches since then? So we'll see. I mean, a lot of people were saying that maybe the Boneyard match with AJ was the last ride for him. Maybe that was. I'm still holding out hope for Survivor Series because it's probably going to fall on the 30th anniversary to the day of his debut. That's got to be the day he hangs it up for me, but maybe he's legitimately done now. Hopefully we'll get some more info in the docuseries. You know, he's been humanized a lot lately. He went years and years and years without ever really breaking character. A couple times here and there, we saw a little bit more of who Mark was during the American Badass days. He's done a couple of interviews sort of throughout the years, but in the last couple of years, he seems to be more active, becoming who he is now. He's on social media. He's doing promos with his wife with a tiger from his pool. He's been on Stone Cold Steve Austin's Broken Skull Sessions, where we really saw him open up and give really his first true shoot interview. You know, I know he's done a couple interviews here or there, and one even with a pastor not long ago where he opened up and revealed a lot. But that one with Austin was, you know, that's the first time we really got to see, you know, him talk like that. So it almost like it takes away a little bit from his mystery and the character and the gimmick and the mystique of The Undertaker, but it also is something that they have to do because I've speculated for years, probably the last 5 years now. I said, what is The Undertaker going to do when he goes into the Hall of Fame? Because we haven't even seen him appear at the Hall of Fame. He's never been in the crowd. He's never been in a suit and a tie sitting next to Stephanie and Hunter. He's never been in the audience. The only time we saw him was when Paul Bearer passed away and he came out and saluted him and he was in full Undertaker gear. So I've always speculated, I'm like, what's going to happen when he goes into the Hall of Fame when he retires and they induct him? He's never even been seen at the Hall of Fame. So if he goes in, does he do his exception speech with the hat and the coat and all that, and he's the Undertaker character? Thank you for putting me in to the Hall of Fame. Or is he going to be Mark? He's going to come out there dressed like a regular person with a bottle of Jack Daniels on the podium and taking a shot to salute his career. So I almost feel like WWE is preparing the fans a lot for a regular human Undertaker for when he does go into the Hall of Fame and he makes his speech as a regular person. We've now seen him that way a few times, in the shoot interviews and now in this long series. So, it's bittersweet. Part of me is like, wow, it's really the end of an era. The Undertaker is now really becoming a real person, which I feel like he has been for the past few years, but this almost solidifies it. But at the same time, it's good to see him like that because he should discuss his career. Think of the stories this guy has that we've never been able to hear. Over the years, he's never been able to do an RF video shoot interview. He's never been able to do a kayfabe commentaries or anything like that. And he probably has more stories to tell than anyone. And he's never really sat down and told it all. So anytime you see him in this type of atmosphere or environment, it's going to be good stuff. And I have a feeling that this docuseries is going to be the best they've done. And it better be because he's the Undertaker. He's a star like no other. And arguably he's the guy I think that took the Godfather role from Andre the Giant, who had kind of that locker room icon, that statue type of character. And I think the Undertaker is a guy that should be statuized with Andre and Bruno and whoever else is at headquarters. He's a big deal in WWE's history. Could you imagine WWE the last 30 years without him? How weird it would look. So I'm interested to see how this is going to be. It's probably going to be it's going to be an interesting watch, and it's going to be a nail-biting, edge of your seat type of watch. I think I'm going to be hanging on every word that's spoken, and I can't wait to see it. And it sucks. I don't know. Do you guys know? I didn't look up the schedule of how they're releasing these. Are they releasing them in one shot? I hope so, because I want to binge watch these bitches. Or do we get one a week? You guys know. Let me know in the comments below. I should have researched that before I came up here. What else do I have on my notes list or my news list before we get into some TV shows from this week? I've got it written down here. No real rhyme or reason, though. Triple H and Stephanie did sell over $1 million each in their stocks this week, probably just for financial reasons. No, that's not real telling or any big news there because they both sold just a fraction of their shares. They still have a shit ton left. So they did do that, and I wrote it down here in my notes, but I don't think it matters. We do have Jimmy Uso. I think it's Jimmy Uso. Jimmy Uso is out with a knee injury, out 6 to 9 months. Apparently, he hurt that on SmackDown in that ladder match that they had. So he's going to have surgery. He's out now, so we've lost the Usos again, which sucks. And I guess that's the reason why they brought up the Forgotten Sons so quickly to the main roster, is because they needed to fill that void of another tag team on SmackDown. Apparently, that's the story. So best of luck to Jimmy Uso. Get well soon, man. Can't wait to see you back. Usos, I'm a big fan of their tag team, so whenever they're out for a long time, I hate it. Also, earlier on, during the super chat that Jordan sent, I did mention the death of Little Richard. Rest in peace to him. He does have a wrestling connection, performing America the Beautiful at WrestleMania 10 and being the inspiration for Mark Marrow's character, his Johnny B. Bad character in WCW. So rest in peace to that rock and roll legend. And I think that'll finally wrap it up for my notes. And it took me about an hour to get through the news on those, on all that. So anyway, let's move into wrestling this week. Let me take a sip of water, knock out a super chat or two. If any of them have come in, I don't think they have. Pretty decent audience, 400 or so folks up in here. Good to see you in here too. What's up, man? How Wheezy. And Diet Water is here too. Man, I got some mods up in here. That's good news. Appreciate it. I got some police. Thank you, Michael. It is Jimmy Uso who has suffered that injury. Yeah, that's who I thought. I just forgot to write his name down. I just put Uso. Uso injured. Anyway, let's talk about Monday Night Raw briefly. I only want to talk about Monday Night Raw because of one thing. We saw the return of AJ Styles. And by the way, if you want my full thoughts on Monday Night Raw, I did a review on it right after the show on Monday. Go on my channel right now and check that out if you want my full thoughts on all the matches and the individual results of the show. But AJ did return in the gauntlet match. And I mentioned on Monday, the one thing I didn't like about the gauntlet match is I felt like they gave that hard-fought effort to Humberto Carrillo for kind of no reason, because I don't think it's going to really wind up leading or benefiting anything with him in the future. I feel like that would have been better to save for like Apollo Crews, for him to demand to compete, and the doctors are like, all right, if you want to do it, you can do it. And he basically has to fight the whole match with one leg. He even beats a couple of people, but then falls to AJ at the end. I thought that would have been a much better way to end it. But instead, AJ came back and beat Humberto Carrillo after he had a couple of wins, and then he was even attacked after one of them, so he was really weakened by that point, and AJ kind of picked up the bones and beat him and won the gauntlet match, being the final entrant now to the Money in the Bank. So we talked about the Money in the Bank and that it's already been filmed, and AJ would be a guy that, you know, I'm looking at my predictions here that I'm going to mention later on. My predictions are weird. I've got 2 names picked for each one, and I've got to decide on them by the time I get to the end here. But AJ is one of the 2 names that I think would be likely to win the Money in the Bank, because it would be a good bounce back for him after a big WrestleMania match with The Undertaker. If he can now win the Money in the Bank, we talked about this on Monday about now that there's no OC anymore, he could jump over to SmackDown. Maybe win the belt from Braun Strowman or something like that. Cash it in on him. That might be fun, because it sounds like the winners of the briefcase might be available to challenge whoever they want. Either that or WWE spoiled the outcome of the women's match, because on Raw, they advertised Becky Lynch showing up this week on Raw to confront the Money in the Bank briefcase holder. Well, isn't that giving it away that it's either going to be Nia, Shayna, or Asuka? Unless a SmackDown person can jump over. So I think that's very likely. So WWE either fucked up, or that's going to be the rules, is that you can challenge anyone you want. So if that's the case, I would like to see maybe AJ win the briefcase, because he's got no really reason to cash in and win the title right now from Drew. They need to concentrate on making Drew, keep him rolling for a little while. But the other title on the other show is all messed up after Roman Reigns dropped out of WrestleMania. So I would love to see AJ jump over there, cash in on Braun or something. That might be fun. But Braun also might continue his story. I'm sure he's going to continue his story with Bray Wyatt, which will probably lean to a match against The Fiend at some point down the road. So AJ is up there with one of my names, and I think he was the right choice to win that gauntlet match, because you got to think WWE wants him in that Money in the Bank match. He can do some fun things at headquarters. So they probably called him to come film the match, and then they said, well, right into the match on TV in a couple of weeks, you'll just win a qualifying match or something like that. And that's when they, took out Apollo Crews. So, maybe part of me wonders if they weren't sure who AJ was going to replace, and it just turned out to be Apollo or what there. But I think I think he'd be a good pick to win the briefcase. But I've got some other fun picks as well, which we'll talk about in a minute. Let's discuss, what are we going to get into first? So we're going to get into AEW, or we're going to get into NXT. I say let's do AEW, because this show was fucking crazy, and both shows were amazing this week. Hats off to NXT and AEW for really coming through. I almost forgot there's no audience. Almost forgot. I mean, especially with AEW, you briefly just forgot about it. I had such a good time here Wednesday night watching these shows, and I thought they did such a good job, and they didn't give me that feeling that I get from Raw or SmackDown, where it is a chore. It is literally a fucking chore to watch SmackDown and Raw. It's just too long, too boring, too silent, no audience. It's awful. But AEW has really done a better job with the empty arena stuff, and NXT delivered with a huge show as well. So bravo to both companies. Thank you for entertaining the shit out of me on Wednesday. And I needed that. I really needed a good night of wrestling, and that's exactly what Wednesday night was. AEW did incidentally win in the ratings again, 732,000 to NXT's 663,000. So another win for AEW, but I'd say both shows were about equally as good. I'm still, normally I save this for the end. I'm just going to come right out here and say it. I did enjoy AEW better. And I'm really saying that based on the main event. If it weren't for that main event, I would have picked NXT in a heartbeat. 2 title matches and a big debut. Probably one of the coolest debuts I've ever seen in wrestling. But even with all of that, they went so all over the place. And the MVPs of that brawl in the main event were Sammy Guevara and Kenny Omega, and some of the shit we saw was so entertaining and so over the top and so bonkers, yet still violent at the same time. It really, to me, epitomized what a professional wrestling show should be. Just entertaining as hell, where anybody turning that on is going to say, holy shit, this is some crazy shit. Even if you're a non-wrestling fan, you were probably like, holy crap, this is kind of fun stuff here. So that's why I'm giving AEW the vote this week. But you know what? Not by much. Not by much. I mean, if I'm writing down a point system here, they beat NXT by 0.5 point. That's it. So it certainly wasn't a runaway victory, but I'm giving AEW the victory. It was a really entertaining show. So anyway, they're back at Daily's Place, and one thing I'll say right off the bat about the environment is how good it looked. And I've felt that way about AEW the whole time. I felt like they've been doing the empty arena things better than WWE when they have some of the talent out there making noise. I think that makes a big difference. We saw even they were the first ones to have the the ramp and the screen on the hard cam side there, or the hard cam facing the ramp and the screen, and WWE copied them and did that. And I got to wonder, based on what we saw on Wednesday, with how they had it set up, how long WWE is going to be able to ignore that, and they're just going to have to copy that too. I think WWE's holding, I think WWE would have done that by now had they come up with it first, but now it's going to be so blatantly ripping off AEW. They got to decide if it's worth it or not, because if they do it, then all the fans are going to be like, oh, you copied them or whatever, but you also have to be smart. And I think that AEW having those people in the audience, even though they're not making a ton of noise, they're making enough noise to where it just helps with the dead, stone cold silence of the shows, because Raw and SmackDown is hard to watch, is it not? Just so quiet. If I was in the ring, I would be so distracted about my work in the ring, because all I could hear in my ears is fucking Michael Cole and Corey Graves, because there's just no, I almost think like they should have the announcers, I don't know, maybe in the back or somewhere where they can't be heard so much by the competitors in the ring. Just a thought. And I really think it would be beneficial to have a few people scattered around ringside. And I'm hoping that, when fans on a limited basis are allowed to get back into arenas and they are able to put some people in the Performance Center, even if it's only 75 people spread out 6 feet apart, that will make enough difference. It's still not going to be the real thing. It's still not going to be a big crowd, with the loud ovations and the huge crowd pops and stuff, but it's going to offer enough kind of white noise in the background that you can kind of focus on the wrestling a little bit more, because it's just hard to ignore that there's nobody there. So seeing the environment that they were in on Daly's Place, with all the talent spread out a lot more this time, instead of just at ringside, now they're up in the seats and they're kind of all over the place. And you just have this beautiful sunset in the background during the first hour of the show that I thought made just for a really nice, interesting looking atmosphere. And I like Daly's Place anyway. Even when it had an audience, I still thought it was a cool looking venue. I just liked the way it looked. And I had the whole time, I didn't know this until the main event, I never knew that Daly's Place was connected to the Jaguars where they play. I had no idea that that was all connected and part of one thing there until we got to the climax of the main event and we saw the pose with the inner circle. So that's one thing I want to say about AEW right up front, is their show just looked great. Despite no fans, I liked the way the show looked. Really good. And we had JR back on commentary. Excalibur was there as well. So JR, made the trip and he's back doing his thing, and AEW seems like they're, kind of back to business, which is good. So anyway, I like the way the show looked. They opened up with Cody Rhodes defeating Joey Janela, and I'll tell you this, man, this is a pretty good opening match, and Janela really, to me, he seems to shine against the bigger stars. He's had really good matches against Moxley. Remember that one they had on AEW Dark, where he dove off the ladder through a table and shit? He's had great matches with Moxley. He took Kenny Omega to the limit a few weeks back, and he had a really good match here with Cody. So, Janela's not my favorite wrestler. I think, he's in the big time now. He's on cable TV. I think Janela should try to get himself in a little bit better shape, but he still can have really good matches. And I think that if he cares enough and he puts down the white claws and focuses on his wrestling career, he can easily be a player, at some point. Don't think he's there yet, but he's got the most important part already down. Have good matches, which he can. And I think he's got to work on some other things. I know Jim Cornette hates him probably because he doesn't look like a wrestler and he's little in a mud show or whatever that other bullshit he spouts out. But when you try to put all that, stupid biased criticisms out of your mind and just judge what you see, Janela can have good matches. I think he needs to do a little bit more with his appearance, and maybe develop his character a little bit more here and there. But what he can do in the ring, I think, is perfectly fine and acceptable. I think he's good. And Cody wound up beating him in a pretty decent match to open the show. And we're going to talk more about Cody later, because I'm suspicious about old Codester. He's been doing some weird things, and he was even called out here later on in a promo, which we'll talk about in a minute, for doing some weird things, and he would do a really weird thing later on as it related to his wife. So stay tuned for that. Next up, we had Nyla Rose defeating Kenzie Page. Kenzie Page is 18 years old. She had a good outing. Great outing for the kid. I mean, this was obviously just a showcase for Nyla Rose, for her to go out there and squash somebody. But the little bit I saw of this Kenzie Page, I don't know where she's worked before and how much experience she's had, but she looked refined. She looked like somebody who'd been wrestling school for a while, that understands how to take bumps and movement, psychology and timing and all that kind of stuff. I thought she looked really good, because, I mean, if she was 25 or something, I wouldn't think anything of this match. But when they made a big deal about her being 18 and I saw the way she worked, I'm like, that girl's going to be something. I mean, she's 18. She still has baby fat on her. She's so young. So, think about what she's going to look like in 7 years with 7 years of experience. and developing herself and her character. So I don't know much about her, but I really liked the little bit that I saw of her. And even though she took an ass kicking from Nyla Rose, I kind of see like potential there. And when you see somebody that young that shows signs of being good, that's good. So I think AEW's female roster needs all the work it can get. And maybe when this girl, gets more experience and gets more matches under her belt, she'll only be better. So that was the one takeaway from that match, is I was just impressed with the kid. Good job, Kinsey. Next up was a little weird. And I remember being a little baffled about this when I was watching this on Wednesday. We had 2 promos back-to-back. The first one was from MJF. He was like in front of a green screen drinking red wine out of a white wine glass, trying to be all bougie, and he ain't bougie. That's some peasant shit right there, MJF. But I guess he goes on to say that he's healed up from his hangnail and from the very dangerous and scary nick that he got on his neck while shaving. Looks like the neck brace is now off. He's ready to return to the ring, and he's going to be there next week. Right after that, you get a promo, another vignette from Shawn Spears, and he seems to be singling out Cody Rhodes again, and he starts talking about Cody and what Cody did the week before. Now, last week on Dynamite, Dustin was in the main event with Lance Archer, and he was getting his ass kicked, and he was bleeding, and Cody was out there with the towel or something, and Spears is basically criticizing Cody for not throwing in the towel on Dustin Rhodes. Now, if I remember right, Dustin was refusing for him to throw in the towel, I think, right? So Spears calling out Cody for that is kind of strange. I wouldn't do that to my brother, kind of thing. You should have thrown in the towel, and basically criticizing him for that, which I thought was weird. I kind of thought Cody and Shawn's beef was over, but they might be rekindling something here. And also last week when Cody refused to refused to throw in the towel, he also did that thing. Was it last week where Brandy got taken out? Remember, Brandy got taken out on the outside of the ring. Oh, it was a match against Darby Allin. She got taken out, and Cody seemed, and I was complaining about this on the podcast, I said that Cody seemed less concerned than he should be, considering his wife just went down. He kind of checked on her, but not the way most babyfaces do. Shawn Michaels lost the WWE title in Madison Square Garden because Jose Lothario took a bump. He didn't care about anything else but checking on his trainer, his friend. So Cody, his wife gets nailed, and he's just kind of like, you all right? And then goes right back in the ring and starts like wrestling. I'm like, I would have been a little bit more concerned if I was him. So anyway, we're going to talk more about that in a minute because it gets really weird here in a second. So Shawn Spears is basically just giving Cody shit for that. You then cut back to the arena where Shawn and MJF, and I remember watching this, I'm like, they literally just did vignettes for both of these guys. Now they're at ringside as a duo being interviewed by Tony Schiavone. And Tony Schiavone, I believe he goes on to announce that MJF is going to take on Jungle Boy. That's going to be a double or nothing, I believe, right? Pretty funny reaction there. I like Shawn's reaction more than MJF. MJF did the spit out thing, which I hate. It's overdone. But I do kind of like the face that Shawn Spears made. He was kind of like looking right in the camera. MJF is really that worried about Jungle Boy, I guess. MJF's character seems to me like a guy that wouldn't fucking sweat Jungle Boy. But he definitely seemed to be surprised by that announcement from Schiavone. And it was also weird because Shawn Spears in the vignette had a beard, and then he was interviewed by Tony Schiavone clean shaven, which another kind of funny thing that I took away from this show. But that was kind of strange to see the timing of that, the 2 vignettes followed by the interview or whatever, especially when they're trying to make it all feel like it's happening in real time. I don't know. I didn't know what to make of all that, but it is interesting some of the things that Shawn Spears was saying, which will tie into what I'm going to talk about here in a second. But before I do, Jon Moxley had a little tune-up or a warm-up match, if you will, against Kazarian. This is a really good match. These guys I don't think have ever worked together, and decent in the end. Jon Moxley won with the paradigm shift. Kaz gave him a really good match, really good run for his money there. And after the match, the Dark Order appeared. Attacks both guys. I think the rest of SCU even comes out to make the save, and they got beat up too. Finally, Brody Lee appears, gets on the mic, and it looks like Moxley's going to be the one that they're targeting here. And Brody Lee is going to be your next challenger for the AEW title. Goes on to say, I'm not the same man who you've crossed paths with before. Obviously referencing, their time in WWE. I know they've had matches. Did they have an actual program? I know the Shield and the Wyatt family did. And I know Ambrose and Harper had matches. I just can't remember if there was like an actual program or feud. Memory escapes me at this time, but I do know they had battles in the company for sure. And Brody Lee kind of referenced that, which I like. And it looks like that's going to be the match at Double or Nothing. Jon Moxley versus Brody Lee. So to me, they're kind of pulling the trigger kind of fast on Brody Lee. I would think that him being the exalted one and the leader of the Dark Order provided it gets over, I think AEW probably would want to put the title on him as a heel. But we just got done seeing that with Chris Jericho and his heel stable, and Moxley's just won the title recently. I don't know if we're really ready to see it be transitioned into a heel, or if maybe they want to do that for effect when the fans come back. They might want to pass the belt over to a heel right now. That way they can have that heel drop the belt when fans are allowed back in the arena to an enormous pop. Maybe they're kind of setting the table for that. I don't know. I'll think more about Double or Nothing as we get closer to it. Right now, I'm not thinking that Moxley's going to drop the belt to this guy, but he might. AEW brought in Brody with high aspirations, and I think they also maybe want to make a point that a lot of these people that WWE didn't use, that they are going to use and say, hey, these people can be world champions. Hey, these people can be stars. And I know there's a lot of debate. Some people aren't really into the Brody Lee character, and don't blame WWE for never doing anything with him or anything like that. But I think we can all agree that Brody should have been used better. Maybe he wasn't going to be world champion in WWE, no problem. I can accept that. But he shouldn't have been eating steak and catering for months at a time either. So I think there's got to be like a middle ground there. So AEW using him in a main event capacity, whether he wins the belt or not, I think is going to be good for Brody Lee. But if Moxley winds up just defeating him with the paradigm shift, pinning him clean, then what does that do for the Dark Order? So I almost think like Brody Lee carrying that belt, gives him even more power for his followers, for his Dark Order. He's got a lot of backup right now. Don't forget, if you're a guy with 20 people backing you up, how do you not win the title? So I'm going to be curious how this match all comes together at Double or Nothing between Moxley and Brody Lee. I put this question on Twitter. Let me know what you guys think in the chat here. Who do you think would win in this tag team match, okay? Tag match with Dean Ambrose and Brody Lee taking on Jon Moxley and Luke Harper. Who wins? Let me know in the chat down below. By the way, we got a pretty good audience of 500 people in here, but we have got ass for likes. Can you guys please do me a favor real quick? Go down there and smash that thumbs up button for me. At least try to get me up to 100 before we start getting into too much of the wrestling results here. I really appreciate that. And Devlin and everybody else, I'm going to knock out those super chats as soon as we're done talking about AEW here, because we got a big subject to talk about next. Lance Archer taking on QT Marshall. QT Marshall and Dustin Rhodes, we all know, are managed by Brandy Rhodes, so Brandy is out there with QT. Archer destroys QT, murders him, beats the shit out of him. That was not going to be a match anyway. We all knew that. He's set to face Cody in the finals of the TNT Championship tournament coming up at Double or Nothing as well. So he's going to be, warming up and getting some tune-ups and squashes up until then. Made very quick work out of QT Marshall, but during the match, Britt Baker, she hops over the railing and attacks Brandy Rhodes. So they might be starting a little bit of a feud here. So she attacks Brandy, throws Brandy in the ring. So Brandy's like all knocked out and unconscious. Jake Roberts, who is back on TV, he was out there with the surgical mask, backing up Lance Archer. I didn't think he was going to be back on TV until this was over. He's been staying at DDP's house, but he was there. And it was cool to see Jake, wearing the mask and shit and all of that. And another thing, actually, I'll save this for the end. I'm going to save that comment for the end of Dynamite. But I do want to make one small comment about AEW and their handling of the virus here in a minute. But it was cool to see Jake Roberts, back on TV, but he was out there with the mask, which is kind of interesting. And then as Brandy is laid out, thrown in the ring, Jake goes out and gets a snake. They've got a snake there, not a big one like Damien, but a smaller one. And he's bringing the snake and he's putting the snake's head right in the face of Brandy. And he then kind of mounts her. He lays basically on top of her. Some people would call that a sexual assault. I was pretty surprised that he was doing that. Now, this is all for show. This is all in story. Brandy's agreeing to this. Cody clearly doesn't have a problem. This is all part of the angle for Jake and Archer to be as evil as possible to Cody and his family. But with all of this going on, with Jake holding a snake that who knows could potentially be poisonous in the face of Brandy Rhodes and laying on top of her in a sexual manner, I have one question. Where the fuck was Cody Rhodes? What was he doing? Taking the biggest dump of all time? Playing Chutes and Ladders with Dustin backstage? Tell me what Cody Rhodes was doing. Where was he? Did they offer an explanation? I was expecting, this is actually what I was expecting to see. Remember back in the day in WWE when, I think it was The Nation, they cornered Chyna in the ring, and the Rock had her, they were holding her, and he was insulting her, and they had moved like a forklift in front of the locker room door of DX, I was expecting the cameras to cut backstage to show Cody either laid out or being held back in some way or being trapped somewhere or not being able to get out there to his wife. Because you have to think that Cody, I suppose he doesn't have to be watching the action that's going on in the ring, but if your wife is out there, you might want to be aware of what's going on. And everybody else does run-ins all the time. Seems like every single wrestler is always aware of everything that's going on because we see run-ins night after night after night in wrestling. So where was Cody? Why was he not running out there with a baseball bat with a nail in it and taking out Jake Roberts for sexually assaulting his wife and sticking a snake in her face? I don't understand that. Like, what's his problem? You know, Cody his mind should be blown. He should be running out there like a raging fucking madman, doing everything he can to rip the throat out of Jake the Snake Roberts. And he didn't even come down to the ring. So where the hell was he? I just thought that was so funny that he had nothing to do with that. And when you combine that with the allegations from Sean Spears in the vignette, and when you combine that with how he didn't seem that concerned with Brandy last week either, when she took that bump and he's kind of like, "You all right? Okay, you're all right." And then he went back to doing what he's doing. Do you think there's something to this? Are we on the verge of a heel turn or something here from Cody? I don't know where the hell Arn Anderson has been. Is that still happening? Is Arn still his Denny's menu carrying coach that we've been seeing when Arn comes back to TV? Is that still going to happen? So to me, it just kind of got me thinking. I don't know if this is all coincidence, but when you already have Sean Spears accusing Cody of not doing the right thing for his family, and then he doesn't run out there to save his wife, what the hell was Cody doing? What's up with that, Cody? Yeah, and there you go, Michael. So I'm not imagining that, right? They did not explain Cody's absence because I'm sure, they could have. That's all it would have taken. Okay, so JR said on commentary that the locker room is in the stadium arena or area along with the trainer's room, and you have to take a golf cart to get there. Okay. Is that still reason enough? I still think, though, if that's the case, they should have had footage of Cody running down the long corridor of the stadium trying to get there. We got cameras backstage trying to find Cody Rhodes, and he's running, trying to get there in time, but he can't. Maybe somebody's like, Cody, come quick, and he's running, he can't get there. At least do that. Otherwise, it feels like he legitimately doesn't give a shit about his wife, which I find funny, but also kind of, it doesn't make a whole lot of storyline sense in terms of Cody, who's supposed to be one of the most over baby faces in wrestling right now. So I don't know what that's about. I suppose it doesn't really matter. They technically have an explanation, and they don't really have to explain it. Cody could have been doing anything. Maybe he just didn't notice it was happening or whatever. But to me, I kind of felt like Cody should make a run-in because we were seeing other run-ins, like to bring up Mike's point here, when the Dark Order attacked Moxley, SCU ran out there. SCU ran out there to save somebody that their own guy was fighting. So how were they able to run out there, but Cody was not? I don't give a shit how far away the locker room was. So anyway, if SCU's hanging around backstage because their partner is wrestling, shouldn't Cody be hanging around behind the curtain because his wife's out there in the same concept? So yeah, that's the only thing that I didn't really like about the show, unless there's a bigger reason for it, unless they did that on purpose because Cody is going to turn out to be a douchebag in the end. Because do you think he's going to win the TNT championship? I think there's a good chance he loses it to Lance Archer. Because if he just beats Lance Archer clean, what'd you bring Lance Archer in for? I almost think there's more of a story for Cody to lose because he's already lost some opportunities. Lost to the AEW champion and can't get another title shot again, apparently, even though he's like the number one contender. So to lose another one here, maybe it's enough to drive him over that edge to become a full-fledged heel. I can't get it done as a babyface, so I'm going to do it as a heel kind of thing. Maybe that's what they're setting up here. I don't know. I still think there's a little bit more shelf life in Cody's babyface run before he makes that switch, but maybe they're doing it a little bit sooner, or maybe they're just subtly teasing us with these hints that Cody underneath maybe isn't a great person. I don't know. I just think that he should have been out there saving his wife from a crazy, perverted old man who's mounting her. So that's just me. I don't know. Any of you guys are out there are married. Would you do that for your wife? Would you go out there and save her? I would think you would. So anyway, Cody, what gives, dude? Anyway, we got to talk about this next match here because it's crazy. Devlin, let me answer the super chat real quick. Thank you, brother, for the $5. So glad MJF is back. Me too. So glad MJF didn't die due to his deadly injuries. Me too, man. I said a prayer every night before I went to bed for MJF and his hangnail. I said, please, Lord, baby Jesus, please fix MJF's hangnail and the nick on his neck. I will be forever indebted to you. And now MJF is healed. He even said he's over-healed. God is good, y'all. God is good. Anyway, we got to talk about the main event. main, what's this? She's going to go off the air for a while, Greg. Yeah, Shaw, you're with me. So I think, losing, I think Lance Archer should probably win the title just for her, because Cody isn't going anywhere. Cody's going to be a player and a contender regardless of what he loses. He's almost, because of his position in the company, he's unburiable. Even if you lose matches, I know fans like to say anybody who loses a match is buried, but that's not really true for somebody like Cody Rhodes. He'll be fine regardless, where if Lance loses, he's not buried by any means. He lost to Cody, a guy that's going to be a world champion one day. No shame in that, but given his ass-kicking, monstrous, what do they call him, the murder hawk warrior, whatever the fuck he is, to lose to Cody like in his first real big competitive match, I don't know. I wouldn't do it. I'd put the belt on him, and then, Cody going heel or something. I think there's more of a story there than Cody winning the belt, because Cody losing, I feel like he can move on with a story. Archer losing, I don't know where he goes from there. That means it's like maybe a one-off with Cody, unless Cody wins in a shady way. Archer's pissed, continues to target Cody, and then beats him for the title down the road. But I think it should be reversed. I think Archer should take the belt now while he's hot and he's over and he's strong and he's being put over strong, before he starts showing weakness, losing matches, shit like that. So that's probably what I'd do in the finals there if it was up to me. Now we can talk about Le Main Event. Le Main Event featured Les Sex Gods taking on Matt Hardy and Kenny Omega. This was it a street fight? How was this advertised? No holds barred street fight, something like that. I don't know. Anyway, one of the people they have at ringside for this is Shug D, who Jericho coined Pineapple Pete, who I think AEW is now starting to call Pineapple Pete, and I think even on Shug D's Twitter page, he's changed his name to Pineapple Pete. But anyway, Jericho will be taking on Pineapple Pete on Dynamite next week, so that should be interesting. Pineapple Pete kind of reminds me of SD Jones a little bit, Special Delivery Jones from back in the 80s, but that's kind of funny that they're going to be having a one-on-one match, considering that the whole match was made based on Jericho's off-the-cuff, ad-libbed commentary during his match a couple weeks ago on Dynamite. That was pretty funny. I'm glad they're getting a match. I'm glad that Shug D is going to get this opportunity to get in the ring with Jericho and get his ass kicked. So anyway, we've got Sammy Guevara, Chris Jericho taking on Matt Hardy and Kenny Omega. This match was all over the place. So nuts, so fun, so much going on, so many different moving parts and pieces here. They've got basically all the inner circle is out there as well. So this is really like a 6-on-2 match here, because Matt and Omega are really, kind of outmatched here just by the pure numbers game. So it kind of starts out in the ring, but very early on, Matt leaves the ring and they're brawling. He's brawling with somebody up through the entrance ramp, and he goes behind like the curtain. He comes back dressed up as like year 2000 Matt Hardy, with the jeans and the belt and the type of shirts that he would wear. He came back like as a wardrobe change, and I guess this is all tying into his multiple personalities. He came out there dressed as a regular Matt Hardy and continues the match. The match then spills outside of the ring, over the barricade, into the concessions area or the concourse area, where you've got all sorts of toys to play with. You've got guardrails and trash cans and forklifts and all sorts of stuff. And, of course, golf carts. So the first thing they do is they come across like one of those ice machines or those ice chests that you see outside of a convenience store or something. You can grab bags of ice. They're using some of the bags of ice as a weapon. They eventually get Matt Hardy and stuff him into the big ice bin and close the doors on him. So he's stuck in there. And then, he would eventually actually come out of that later on. It'd probably take like 5 or 6 minutes. He's changing his clothes in there. He comes out, he emerges from the ice chest, resurrected as Damascus this time. So he's got a whole new outfit on. So he kind of re-enters the fray there. So that's kind of like his third personality of the match, which is kind of fun. So when they're into the concessions area, Matt Hardy and Kenny Omega commandeer a golf cart. And this was probably my favorite part of the whole match, is just the visual. This past Wednesday on TV in wrestling was a night of visuals. So many of them. And this was one of them, when you had, I think it was Matt Hardy driving the golf cart and Kenny Omega's in the passenger seat. They run over Jericho, or kind of clip him. They kind of hit the side of him. He goes down. They turn the golf cart around, and you got Sammy Guevara sitting there, and they floor it and start chasing poor Sammy. It reminded me of the scene in fucking Back to the Future 2, where Marty is in the tunnel and Biff is in the car. You know what I mean? And Biff is in the car and he's going to run him down, and Marty's got the hoverboard. If only Sammy Guevara could have borrowed Kushita's hoverboard, he might have been able to get away here. So he's running, and Matt Hardy is flooring this thing, and Matt has got this crazy look on his face, and the way Matt Hardy's hair was blowing in the wind as he's driving this golf cart was fucking hilarious. And then Omega is leaning out the passenger side, pointing at Sammy and screaming. And I had to put it in the thumbnail here because it was such an amazing visual of seeing their faces chasing after Sammy, and he's running his fucking nuts off, and he takes a full bump to the golf cart. He jumps up, catches it right in the face. It almost spins him around. Bump from hell, getting run over by the golf cart. That was fucking great. So Sammy, I think, is dead from that. They then find themselves near one of those, I don't know what they're called, those lifts, those scissor lifts, I think is what Excalibur might have called it. And they start brawling near that. You've got Jericho and Hardy brawling near that thing. Kenny Omega starts climbing up into the scissor lift, and it starts lifting and starts raising him up, I don't know, 10, 15 feet in the air. Jake Hager has now joined the fray, and the three of them kind of get ready there, and Omega just takes a giant moonsault off the top of that thing, which again was another really good visual, because this is not a moonsault off a top rope. This isn't even a moonsault off of a balcony or off of a ledge onto a table or anything like that. This is something that no wrestler has ever thrown a moonsault off of before, and a very dangerous and risky bump, but he took it and they landed it perfectly, knocks all three guys out. Eventually, the numbers game catches up with them. Matt Hardy gets powerbombed through a table. That essentially leaves the entire Inner Circle faction to take on Kenny Omega. They hit him with a powerbomb, like on top of the golf cart. Eventually, Jericho nails Omega with the Judas effect and gets the pin right there in the backstage area. So I guess it was Falls Count Anywhere. And the Inner Circle won, which they should have. I mean, hell, it was like 6-2 or whatever it was. And the best part, I think, or not the best part, but a great way to close the show, and another great visual, was at the very end where they all kind of go outside to the entrance of where the football stadium is, and they pose. The entire Inner Circle poses, and in the background on the Jumbotron in the stadium, they've got the Inner Circle logo and graphic up there. Great visual, awesome shit from all those guys involved, and an absolutely balls out main event. And this is the type of stuff I like to see. This is the type of stuff, to me, that epitomizes a wrestling show. It doesn't have to be all one way. It doesn't have to be just wrestling and nothing else. When you can combine wrestling and violence and drama and comedy all into one, I think that's what makes the best wrestling show. And I never found one single thing that they did in this match to be over the top or to be too ridiculous, because when you start doing crazy stuff, you have to be careful not to tread across that line of just being silly. And they didn't. These guys kicked the shit out of each other. They had the silliness factor there with three different Matt Hardy personalities competing in the match. We had that stuff. We had some crazy visuals with the golf cart and, throwing guys in ice chests and all that stuff, but still, it was done in a brutal way. Both Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara got run over. We've got moonsaults off of giant apparatuses. Guys are going through tables. Guys are bleeding. It was still a very brutal fight while being entertaining at the same time. Kind of how they did weeks and weeks ago. Maybe it was during the build to the Jericho match or whatever. But remember when they were brawling out in the concession area and Jericho's like, I got tickets. It was like that. It was still a serious brawl, but had you laughing your ass off at the same time. And to me, that's what wrestling is all about, to be entertained. And it wasn't about who should go over or who's a mistake or who buried this or anything like that. It's about watching a match, going on the ride, and having fun. And that's exactly what this match gave us. And because of this match alone, that's what gives AEW the nod to me this week for having the better show, because they gave me the more entertaining wrestling show. Only by a hair. NXT, like I'm about to talk about here in a minute, was fucking amazing. But this is the type of stuff I like to see, and this is the stuff that AEW has been pretty good at so far. A lot of these over-the-top type of matches and shit, they've been pretty entertaining. Moxley and Omega and all the crazy shit they did in their matches, and some of the Jericho brawls that we've seen when he was champion in the Inner Circle. The match with Moxley and how that was set up. The Jericho celebration night where he had the big present when his dad was inside, and then Moxley broke the champagne bottle over his head. Things like that. A lot of these type of segments are highly entertaining in AEW, and this was a fun fucking match. Not everything has to make sense. Sometimes it can be fun. Sometimes it can be silly, but as long as you maintain, the serious and violent aspect of it, which I think they did, I think you've got a recipe for success. So hats off to AEW. Great night of wrestling. Great main event. The only takeaway from this is I really was kind of grossed out by Jake Roberts and, his behavior, because he's already a dirty old man as it is. So it makes it even worse, the fact that it's Jake doing this. The only thing that maybe would have been worse is Scott Hall in terms of perversion. But Maybe could have done without that, but at the same time, it didn't really bother me in the grand scheme of things. And I thought overall, AEW delivered a fine ass night of wrestling. So bravo to you guys. And NXT, they weren't too shabby either. A lot of good stuff on this show, man. A lot of good stuff here too. But before we get into NXT, let me cruise back, answer a couple super chats that's been flying in. One from Dante Zim, or Dante ZIM. Thank you very much, brother. Good to see you again. Thanks for the $10. Hey, GoodMicWork, what's your thoughts on states reopening small businesses? Thanks. I'm okay with states reopening small businesses provided they follow guidelines, which I think they are. My business and restaurants. I went back to work the other night for the first time in 6 weeks. Just went in for a couple of hours because we're doing amazing to-go business and stuff. And when we are allowed to reopen, we're only going to be allowed to reopen at partial capacity. So, we're probably going to divide the place in half between, takeout orders and then letting, a few people. 25% is the number that's being tossed around in terms of capacity and stuff. But all I care about is what scientists and health experts say. Don't give a shit about what a politician says. Don't give a shit about what a Republican says or a Democrat says. I care about what educated, smart people say. And some governors listen to those educated, smart people. Some don't. I'm happy I got Gavin Newsom as my governor here in California because he's not going to do anything stupid, because he's not stupid. He's going to follow the right guidelines, reopen the state, but do so in the best possible manner with these different phases and the, kind of easing our way back into it. You can't just flip a switch and then everything's back to normal tomorrow. So if states want to reopen, all I ask is that they follow the guidelines. They follow the recommendations of the professionals that know what the fuck they're talking about. Nobody in a MAGA hat knows anything about science. A lot of Democrats don't either. So I don't think we should be listening to anything like that. And that's what's really made me mad about this whole pandemic, is it's now somehow turned into a political issue. If there was ever anything, because we've never been more divided ever than we are right now in this country. But if there was ever something to bring us together, you would think this would be it. 9/11, we all came together. And that was 2,000 people died. Now we're talking about close to 100,000 people. And we can't come together on a common ground here. We have to be so divided. Now, if you're a right winger, you want everything open tomorrow. And if you're a left winger, you don't want to be stupid. That's not the division we need right now. We all need to be together in this, because this should have no political tie-ins at all. This should have nothing to do with politics and should have everything to do with safety. But it doesn't. It's now becoming, like everything in this fucking dumb country we live in, it's becoming a division. You got people that believe this politically, want everything reopened, and people believe this, want this. And it shouldn't be like that. When it comes to something like this, public health, public safety, the fact that we don't all want to die, this should bring us together, not divide us. And to me, it's been a really good illustration of how fucked up this country is. Because even something as serious like this, that should put us all on the same page, is doing anything but. That's where I live. And I don't like it here. So I don't know if, wherever you guys live around the world, if it's the same thing in your country, but here it's fucking ridiculous. So all I ask is people just do the smart thing, and I don't really care what else. I'll listen to scientists, I'll listen to health organization officials, and that's it. Everybody else can suck my ass. Michael, appreciate the $5, dude. Appreciate it. I'm surprised Vince never named a jobber after Phil Mushnick. I'm surprised too. Maybe he didn't want to bring attention to his name. Maybe not name him directly after Phil Mushnick, but maybe a version of his name. But there's also, Sam Mushnick, who promoted in St. Louis for years, is a fucking legend. So it's an unfortunate last name to share with a douchebag like Phil. But it would have been funny if you at least got a guy like, maybe spelled his name different and get a little squirrely looking jobber that kind of looked like Phil Mushnick a little bit and have him go out there and get beat. But then Phil would just write 9 articles about that as well. I think it's better not to poke the bear there. But yeah, I kind of lump Mushnick into the same category as like Chris Cruz and what's his name, Segura, right now, as just monumental douchebags that exist out there in this world. Anyway, let's move on to NXT now. We got a lot to talk about. I appreciate you guys getting those likes up for me. Thank you very much for getting me up to 100. Do you think we can get to 200 before the podcast is over? That would be really sweet. I'd appreciate it. But now we got to get into NXT. And man, I'm 2 hours in and we haven't even talked about NXT yet, but we're going to wrap this up soon. I don't have hardly anything to say about last night's SmackDown, and then I'll probably run through the Money in the Bank predictions relatively quickly here. And then I'll get out of y'all's faces because you got another 4 hours of me tomorrow. And I don't want to be like a 3-hour Raw. I don't want to overexpose myself. So anyway, let's go on to NXT. Like I said earlier, to me, AEW had the better show this week, but not by much. We opened up the show with Johnny Gargano taking on Dominik Dijakovic. Johnny Gargano, much like Candice LeRae last week, debuts some new theme music. I'll judge it more the more I hear it. But sorry for coughing right in the mic there, but my immediate impression of it was good. And Johnny really seems like he's all in on being a heel. He did every single fucking heel trope possible in this match with Dominic, because he's also grossly overweight in this match, but he really took it to him. You had Candice LeRae out there at ringside getting all involved in the match. Johnny Gargano, he is able to manipulate the top turnbuckle pad coming off and exposing the steel, which he eventually runs Dijakovic into, and then hitting his DDT finisher, the one final beat for the win there. Really solid win against a really solid opponent. Excuse me. I don't know why I'm coughing. So that's pretty good for Johnny. I like the fact that he's embracing the heelness. I like the fact that he's not playing around, and that he's, somebody like him, I always wonder if they can really be an effective heel just given their size. He can't really push anybody around or be that intimidating. But, I think that's part of the reason why they put him in the ring with a big guy right off the bat, to show that he is serious and he's to be taken seriously and a force to be reckoned with, kind of thing. So I think Dominic, my phone is talking to me. Siri thinks I'm talking to her. Siri, kiss my ass. I think that was kind of the point of putting him in there with somebody like Dominic, and I think that was a really solid first opponent for heel Johnny Gargano. And Candice looked good last week. I really like the duo together. Excuse me. We had Cruiserweight title tournament resumes this week on NXT as well. We had a couple of matches here. The first one was Akira Tozawa defeating Jack Gallagher. So this puts 2-0 for Tozawa, and I believe he faces Phantasma next week. So that should be really fun. And when, there's two people I think that are 2-0, I wonder how many they can string up. I wonder if Tozawa will finally drop one here, because Phantasma, I think, is 1-1. If he'll go to 2-1 next week, or if he'll keep rolling at 3-0, should be interesting. I mean, hell, by the time this tournament is over, Jordan Devlin might be allowed back here, and we can just have that match for the title like we originally wanted. Next up, we had Xia Li taking on Chelsea Green. Nothing much to say about this match. Looks like they're continuing the issue between Xia Li and Aaliyah that was set up months ago when Aaliyah got a broken nose from Xia Li. She came out there to get involved in this, which allowed Chelsea Green to capitalize on the distraction and hit her finisher, the Unprettier, or I'm Prettier, on Xia Li. Now, I like the I'm Prettier name. I think it's a very cool play on Christian's Unprettier from back in the day, but the move doesn't look nearly as good, and her version of it, I always have an issue with moves that don't look like they hurt. And this one, you got to be careful with it anyway, because when you're dropping somebody down on their head, the Unprettier, even executed properly, is still a pretty dangerous move to do. And you very rarely get the effect of, somebody's head going right into the mat. And the way Chelsea does it, it just doesn't look good. I think she needs to find either, number one, a new finisher, or tighten up her execution of this one at the Performance Center. Keep working on it. Try to figure out a way to get it, just polish it up a little bit. Just looks a little bit too silly. I don't know. Not a big fan of the I'm Prettier, but I'm a huge fan of the name. So I'd like to see her keep the finisher if she can just start doing it better. That's all I really care about. And as far as, and Chelsea Green, I love. I mean, she's not hard to really watch wrestle, to be honest with you. But the alliance with Robert Stone, look, I am never going to give a single solitary shit about Robert Stone as long as he's wearing those pants that he was wearing on Wednesday. What is with it, guys? I've said this before. You're killing me here. What is with the skin-tight pants that come up halfway up your shin, no socks and loafers? Explain that look to me. And women, are you fucking these dudes? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? I don't like that look. I think it's silly and ridiculous. I'm not mad about it. I'm not hot about it. I just think every time I see a guy wearing pants and shoes like that, I'm like, what are you doing? And I guess I'm just an old man. If I was in my 20s, maybe I'd be dressing like a complete douchebag. I would like to think that I wouldn't be. But when I see guys, even in public, wearing that, if you're wearing skin-tight pants that come up halfway up your leg and you're wearing dress shoes with no socks, I guarantee you're a douchebag. There's no way you can't not be. No regular nice guy dresses like that. Anyway, I'm never going to care about Robert Stone or his dumb faction until he stops dressing like a douche. Next up was arguably, even up against AEW's main event, I will say, even though I gave AEW the victory this week in terms of what show I like better, they didn't have the best moment. They had some great moments on their show. The best moment by far, I think, of the week went to Karrion, Kross, and Scarlett. They officially debuted in the ring on NXT on Wednesday. And I'll tell you, I almost forgot that there's no audience, because when I see what they did, I'm like, oh, it'd be so great to have an audience for that. But it really worked without it, just based on the presentation. I loved the black and white effect and all of the smoke, and then Scarlett coming out and she's kind of lip syncing the song, which apparently she actually sings. She actually sings the lyrics to this song. She's dressed in just a crazy black, sexy outfit. Kross is behind her, and then it kind of transitions into this really hard rock theme. Some of the colors were like black and red, along with the black and white. And the whole overall presentation of it was one of the best debuts in NXT history in terms of like an entrance. I think Shinsuke Nakamura had an awesome debut as well, but this one was so elaborate, and it really looks like WWE has put a ton of time and thought into this, and he is going to be treated as a major player. You know, I mean, he's going to be a contender and a serious deal right off the bat here. I could not be happier for the guy. All the bullshit he had to deal with in Impact, trying to get out of that, coming into WWE, them changing his name, all that. I even said I wasn't sure if Killer Kross would even be a really big deal right off the bat. I thought they'd have to build him up, but they're bringing him in as a big deal instead of, you know, starting him out and him becoming a big deal. So I like that. And Scarlett, I think the pairing with her is perfect. They are a great looking duo. Scarlett gives me slight Sensational Sherry vibes, because after their amazing entrance, Kross actually had a match against Leon Ruff, which he won in about 5 seconds, beat the shit out of the poor kid. But during the match, Scarlett is kind of out there making a lot of noise. She's, you know, I don't know, she's loud and sexy and angry and dangerous all at the same time, and that's the same type of vibes I got from Sensational Sherry back in the day. And I feel like, you know, she might have borrowed a little bit of that from her. I just kind of picked up on those vibes from her, and I just loved the presentation. They're going to be a big deal, man. They're going to be a really big deal. I wasn't sure if they would even bring them in together at first until we saw them in the car when they kind of first debuted. I wasn't sure if Scarlett would kind of be doing her own thing, but the fact that they've paired them together works well. They look good together. The entrance is great. We know Killer Kross, or Karrion Kross, is a killer. He's very good in the ring, very believable in the ring, and can legitimately kick some asses. And I'm excited for this, man. I'm wondering if he's going to have like, if it's going to be like The Fiend, where they're going to hit the title on him so quickly. Hopefully Karrion Kross will not lose to Goldberg in Saudi Arabia after that. But I wonder, since he's come on so strong here and been a big deal, if they're going to make him one, and he's going to get like a title shot relatively quickly at some point, or if they hold him off. I still feel like Adam Cole needs to drop the belt to a babyface before Karrion Kross takes that person down. But in the meantime, I just hope he continues to go on a tear here, and I hope he has some meaningful matches against some quality opponents while his momentum continues to build. And I'll tell you one match, I said this as soon as he was signed by the company, there's one match that I think would be fun to see in NXT, and that is Karrion Kross against Matt Riddle. I'd wonder who'd win in a real fight between those two guys. That might be interesting as well. But that might be a fun type of match to have, especially since Matt Riddle is also kind of like a legitimate badass and a scary looking motherfucker too when he's in there, but he's also very fun loving. He's the exact opposite of Karrion Kross. They are literally polar opposites, and I think a feud between those two could be interesting, provided, you know, Matt, he's not too like D-Generation X-ish, where he's literally laughing at everything Killer Kross or Scarlett is saying. Because you don't want to do that. You don't want to bury him by laughing and not taking him seriously. I'd like to see Killer, or Karrion, I keep calling Killer, I'd like to see Karrion Kross almost get to Matt Riddle a little bit, maybe change Matt Riddle, because Matt, he's awfully fun-loving. He's that, you know, stoner dude, but underneath all that lies a fucking badass. So if you have, you know, kind of laid back, chill, what up, bro, Matt Riddle run into Killer Kross, and maybe Killer Kross almost scares him straight, where Riddle's like, okay, I have to be serious now, because if I'm not, this guy's going to take me down. I think maybe it could be make for an interesting, you know, title program someday down the line. I don't know. And I don't know if they've ever crossed paths on the independent level. I have no clue. But that would be, to me, an interesting match down the road. Now, speaking of Matt Riddle, he and Timothy Thatcher were challenged earlier on in the night by Imperium for a title match. I believe that match is going to be happening next week. So Riddle and Thatcher had a promo backstage where they accepted the challenge. So the tag titles will be on the line next week. And I also speculated about Timothy Thatcher that I think he might go heel, because he has that history already with Ring Comp and Walter and some Imperium tie-ins there. And so since he's kind of an interim placeholder for Pete Dunne anyway, I almost wonder if he can purposely sabotage the match next week in order to get the titles with Imperium, and he can join them. And then Matt Riddle, has to wait for Pete Dunne to come back to go chase down and regain those titles or something like that. Or you can move Riddle on back into singles and maybe set him up with some sort of a program with Karrion and Kross in the future. So part of me still wonders if we're going to get that Timothy Thatcher heel turn, or they could just continue rolling. And that would be fine with me too. Next week, if Riddle and Thatcher retain, great. Because one thing Thatcher has done, I think, really well is being a pretty decent placeholder for Pete Dunne. He doesn't have the same chemistry with Riddle that Pete does, but similar in the sense that he's kind of no nonsense and he's very different from Matt Riddle. And it still makes for some funny vignettes and segments backstage. And we had a really funny segment last week with the Newly Bro show. So Riddle and Thatcher were very upset too about the Imperium crashing the Newly Bro show last week. So they accepted their challenge and the tag belts are on the line next week on NXT. Next up, we had pretty good match. I was looking forward to this one. Io Shirai challenging Charlotte Flair for the NXT title, one of 2 title matches on this show. And it's one of the few times where a disqualification actually made me happy. I was really looking forward to this match. Absolutely. Io Shirai and Charlotte, fuck yeah, sign me up. Give me that match 3 times. But I also wasn't really too concerned for Charlotte losing. I really thought that she was probably just going to beat Io Shirai straight up and clean and probably just keep that belt warm for whenever Rhea Ripley comes back, because I've maintained that ever since the WrestleMania match, that provided Rhea Ripley comes back, regains the belt from Charlotte, and Charlotte goes back to Raw, I really have no issue with Charlotte winning the title at WrestleMania. I had the same issue and feelings with Charlotte and Asuka years ago. It's just that they didn't follow through with the Asuka thing like I wanted them to. So I was hoping they would do that with Rhea Ripley this time around. So because of the ending of this match, it almost feels like WWE's meeting me halfway and they're trying to pull some shady shit here. So anyway, Io Shirai and Charlotte have a very good match. Real good match. It ends in a DQ outside of the ring when Charlotte pulls a kendo stick out from underneath the ring and nails poor Io Shirai with it. Referee rings the bell. Disqualification. That surprised me. I was watching that on Wednesday. I'm like, did WWE just protect Io Shirai by not having her lose to Charlotte? I thought for sure Charlotte would just tap her out. So after the match, Charlotte continues the attack after the DQ. And that's when Rhea Ripley returns. Rhea Ripley shows up, so luckily she hasn't been deported. The visa issue was an easy fix. It only took a couple of weeks to get it cleared up. She's back. She hits the ring, saves Io Shirai, runs off Charlotte, and I was like, sweet, Rhea Ripley's back. WWE is going to do what I wanted them to do, because the fact that she's targeting Charlotte, you know we're going to get that rematch. You absolutely know it. So the funny thing was, though, after the match, or after Charlotte is run off by Rhea, Io Shirai doesn't seem too happy with Rhea Ripley, and she's kind of barking at her and screaming at her. And it's really funny. They're both kind of walking up the ramp together, and Io's screaming, and Rhea's like, shut up, fucking shut up. Like, I saved you. Like, shut your fucking mouth. And then backstage, Rhea Ripley is interviewed where she says she wants another shot at Charlotte. So I'm like, sweet, there you go. But that's when Io Shirai showed up, and they're barking at each other and you have to be pulled apart or whatever. So one of 2 things is going to happen here. We're either going to get a match between Io Shirai and Rhea Ripley, winner faces Charlotte, or we're getting a triple threat. Now, I've maintained that as long as Rhea Ripley wins the belt back, I am perfectly in favor of Charlotte winning at WrestleMania. But WWE might try to pull a fast one here by now creating a triple threat, which means Rhea can pin Io Shirai to get the belt back and Charlotte never has to take the loss. So I defend Charlotte. I defend WWE's use of her. There's no reason to hate her to the level that the fans do, and I will always have her back and I'll always defend her. But this is almost something that I could do without. I appreciate WWE meeting me halfway. I said as long as Rhea comes back and wins the belt back, then I'm fine with Charlotte winning. And maybe WWE felt the same thing, but now they could technically beat Io Shirai and have Rhea win the belt back that way. So I'm hoping that's not the case. What I'm hoping they do is one-on-one, since they did tease dissension between Io and Ripley, they make a number 1 contenders match, because there are no automatic rematch clauses anymore. So Rhea Ripley shouldn't just automatically be granted one. By that rule, you should maybe have to earn it. So have a match with Io Shirai first, beat Io Shirai, and then face Charlotte for the title. That is what I would like to see. But knowing the WWE, and knowing how they treat people like Charlotte and Roman Reigns, I can almost see them going the triple threat route and protecting Charlotte, having her drop the belt without having to take the pin. What do you guys think is going to happen? I think the 3-way is likely, just based on how we are used to WWE behaving. I think the 3-way is what we're going to see here. But maybe not. You never know. But, even if that happens, even though that's not ideal, not my first choice, it's acceptable. I want Rhea Ripley to continue. I think Rhea Ripley's a star. That's why I think she should beat Charlotte one-on-one. Because I'm not like one of these fans where I feel that like, because there's so many of these fans out there where every single time Charlotte gets in the ring, the fans say she should lose. She should lose. You know, well, she can't lose every time. And when you get a star the level of Charlotte and how WWE treats her, you know, they put her over huge, which means she is huge now. Can't change that, which also means when people like Charlotte or Roman Reigns lose a match, it should be kind of a big deal. And with Rhea Ripley showing so much potential and potentially being the star of the future in the women's division, this is one of those times where I think a clean Charlotte loss is warranted and is necessary. You don't want to do it all the time. You know, once you build a megastar like this, you don't want to have them lose in every match, because then when they lose, it's not as important anymore. I want Charlotte Flair losses to be a big deal, and I think Rhea is one of those people that deserves to beat her clean just to solidify Rhea as a major player and as a star of the future. Because if you do that, you know, you can still keep them separated for a long time until they cross paths on the main roster again one day. And when that happens, they're one-on-one. You got they're 1-1, I should say. And now you got the rubber match between the two of them. Have it a big pay-per-view, maybe this time for a WWE title, and then whoever wins. Doesn't really matter, as long as you kind of do Rhea right here, you know, and I hope that they do. I think that based on how they pushed her, remember how hard they were putting her over? To me, her path to the title was way more important and fun than being champion. So maybe they have a chance to kind of hit the reset button with Rhea Ripley here. And if she does win the belt back, and if she is able to beat Charlotte Flair clean, my God, that's going to make her just a huge, mega, unbeatable star in NXT, probably to the point where she'll hold the belt so damn long, fans will start getting mad like they did with Shayna Baszler and shit. So I just think that when you beat one of your main stars clean, it should be done in a way that really benefits another talent. And I think you have to be a special talent to be considered to beat somebody like that. And I think Rhea Ripley is. So I would prefer them doing that. But I'm kind of with you guys. 3-way is probably what we're going to see here, which just sucks. But still a good match and fun to see Io Shirai and Charlotte mix it up. We've never seen that match before. Brand new match that nobody's ever seen this past Wednesday on NXT. A lot of good moments on Wednesday, man. AEW and NXT were the shit. Next up, we had another cruiserweight or interim cruiserweight tournament match. Kushida taking on Jake Atlas. Really great match, even though it was short. Kushida tapped out Atlas with an armbar. He is now 2-0 as well. And I think do you have Kushida and Tozawa next week? Can't remember. I gotta look at the brackets. But anyway, it's kind of interesting that those two guys are 2-0. Can't wait to see how they turn out in this tournament and who's going to win. Who do you guys think the front runner right now is for the tournament? Do you think Drake Maverick's going to come all the way back? Or is he going to be somebody like Kushida or Tozawa? I really don't know. Guess in the long run, it doesn't really matter. Next up, we had Cameron Grimes defeating Denzel Dejournette in a squash match. After the match, he gets on the mic, starts talking shit about Finn Balor. Now, Finn Balor earlier on in the night did a promo warning his attackers because he was attacked, you know, backstage last week or the week before that knocked him out of the match with Velveteen Dream. So he's vowing to get revenge, and when he finds him, he's going to kick his ass or whatever the fuck. So he's vowing to find the assailant and make the assailant's life miserable. Grimes gets on the mic after his win and said, you know, I wish I would have assaulted Finn Balor, but somebody beat me to it. And if Balor was here right now, I'd slap his face. And he's kind of talking into the hard cam. And while he's talking, Balor just shows up, casually walks to the ring, gets in the ring all this time while Grimes is talking, and just walks up right next to him and kind of does, what's up, man? And Grimes immediately backs down. He's like, well, I didn't mean it. And Balor then kicks his ass, and I think that now sets up a match next week on NXT, Cameron Grimes versus Finn Balor. So that should be good, and it should be a good victory for Finn Balor. Finally, we get the NXT title match in the main event. Adam Cole defending the NXT title against Velveteen Dream. Now, even without those recent allegations on Velveteen Dream, even if that didn't happen or anything, I still feel like I would have predicted Cole to keep the belt here just based on how long he's had it. And I don't know. I like Dream. I absolutely think he should be NXT champion. It just didn't feel right in this particular setting. So I didn't really predict him to drop the belt here to Dream. The match was really good. It had everything you'd expect from Adam Cole and Velveteen Dream. I loved the spot where the Undisputed Era, Fish and Strong come down to the ring, and they're coming down to interfere. They're coming down the rampway, and out of nowhere, Dexter Lumis crawls out from underneath the ring just like a fucking snake, and Roderick and fucking Bobby Fish stop in their tracks, and he starts taking them out. And just the visual of that, again, it was like a night of visuals between both shows. See him crawl out of the ring like that. I mentioned last week that I'm oddly kind of into him. When I first saw him, he did nothing for me. Didn't like his douchey haircut. Thought his mustache was weird. But seeing him kind of lurk in the shadows, he showed up in that tag team match a couple of weeks ago. He, who'd he beat? Shane Thorne or something last week on NXT, and kind of sat there with that blank stare, rubbing the head of the opponent that he defeated, and now crawling out under the ring like this. There seems to be no rhyme or reason or motivation to anything he's doing, and he's constantly keeping people guessing. The only thing that we can really tell for sure is that he's a babyface, but usually guys like this are heels. You know, these big, like, no-nonsense, silent ass kickers are usually heelish type of characters, but he appears to be a babyface coming out there and saving and helping a lot of babyfaces out. This could all just be a swerve to go heel in the end, but for right now, he's helping out the babyfaces, although his help here really didn't help Velveteen Dream in the long run because he would wind up losing. He's out there when Dexter is out there brawling with Roderick and Fish. The referee gets taken out, and Velveteen Dream then does like a top rope dive onto all three guys, taking all three guys out on the outside of the ring. But then when he gets back in the ring, the referee went down and he hit the Purple Rainmaker first on Adam Cole. Had the match won, but there's no ref. Then he dives over, takes out everybody on the outside of the ring, and when he gets back in, he literally walks right into a super kick from Adam Cole, and then Adam Cole hits the last shot for the win. And by this point, the referee's kind of come to, covers Velveteen Dream, gets the 1-2-3, and Adam Cole retains, which is fine. You know, I'm fine with Adam Cole continuing to run with the title right now. Don't know who the guy is going to be to take it off of him. I actually would have thought it would be Velveteen Dream, and I think it still can be. This might have been just the first match in a series between the two because Dream did have the match won, and Cole won in a shady way. He had all sorts of help from his Undisputed Era cohorts, so this might wind up leading to a stip in a future match. Cage match might be fun. Something to basically reduce the effect of the interference from the Undisputed Era, whether they're barred from ringside or, you know, if you do a no holds barred or a falls count anywhere match, Undisputed Era can be involved in that, much like we saw in the Inner Circle in the main event of Dynamite. So I think maybe a cage is best here for these guys, although Dream was just in a cage. Didn't he face Roderick in a cage, right? So I feel like we've already done that recently, so maybe a cage isn't the best thing to do, but I do feel like it could lead to a rematch between the two, and it probably will. So in the future, I do want to see, provided Dream doesn't have any legal problems, I do want to see Velveteen get a run with the belt because he is too damn good. So, like I said, that is just an amazing night of wrestling. When you compare that to Raw and SmackDown, Wednesday blew it away. I don't think we're quite there yet to where the combined rating of these two shows is beating a Raw, but it came close. Let's see, 663. And 732. All right, yeah, so you're looking at about a 1.3 million on that combined, and Raw drew its lowest rating ever of a 1.68, which is real bad. Lowest in history. So yeah, we're getting there. Eventually, maybe one day, the combined two shows will get a better rating of Raw, or than Raw. I think we're almost on the way there. Real close. All right, now we'll move on to SmackDown, and then I will quickly run down the Money in the Bank card, and then I'll get out of here. This is going to be a 2-hour and 45-minute podcast if I don't shut my mouth soon, but we're not going to talk much about SmackDown anyway. Let me just cruise back over here, make sure I've got no more super chats that I missed. I think there was at least one. No, there wasn't. I already got you, Michael, about Phil Mushnick. All right, we're good. We're caught up on that. Wonderful. And pretty good audience in here right now, 600 or so people. Very happy, Greg. All right, let's go into SmackDown now. This show was annoying as shit. I didn't even want to watch it, didn't need to watch it. Every single match on here was fucking pointless except for the opener, which was Sonya Deville taking on Mandy Rose. I kind of like before the match, Dolph approached Sonya, who really just looks great. She looks like she means business. She has been really impressive to me the past couple of weeks on TV. I am much more Team Sonya than I am Team Mandy. Even though, you know, Mandy has done a fair amount to impress me as well. I generally don't like the blonde-haired, big boob type of wrestlers, but Mandy is still capable, but I just think I like Sonya better. And I really like backstage prior to the match, Dolph approaches Sonya and he tells Sonya to go easy on Mandy's face. He said, don't mess up her face. So Dolph is still completely expecting and obviously has some sort of a plan to destroy Otis and get back with Mandy. So he's trying to protect her face and told Sonya to go easy on her. And Sonya says, I can't make any promises. Match is pretty good, back and forth a little bit between the two, but it did end rather abruptly when Sonya rolled up Mandy. It looked to me like she had a handful of tights, but the announcers didn't really allude to that, I don't think. I don't think Cole or Graves mentioned the handful of tights, which means maybe she didn't have a handful of tights and I just saw wrong. So she rolls up Mandy, got the win, and, you know, kind of scurried out of the ring very, very happy. But what I found funny about that is Sonya, you know, backstage was like, I'm going to beat her to a pulp. I'm going to fuck her up. She's going to have to be hospitalized. And she beat her with a quick roll up and then scurried out of the ring and like ran away. So, I mean, it's not really much of a victory there. She didn't set out what she wanted to do. She pinned her, you know, with a quick roll up, but she didn't beat her ass or anything like that. So that match was what it was. It's obviously not over between those two. At some point, I'm sure we'll get a mixed tag as well with Otis and Dolph and all of that. But I don't know when that will be. It's probably something they would have scheduled for Money in the Bank. And I still think whenever we get the climax or whenever we get the big payoff or whenever we get some sort of a swerve, part of me thinks that Tucker might still be involved in this somehow. Otis even, I don't know where I read this. Otis had said something about that if he wins the Money in the Bank briefcase, he wants to cash it in on the tag team champions. Otis, brother, don't do that. You know, that's terrible. Those titles are meaningless. I'd rather go after the big prize. But anyway, we'll see. I still think there's going to be some sort of a big reveal at some point in this whole thing. And the match, you know, was what it was on SmackDown, but for them to advertise it for the week, I was kind of expecting a little bit more out of it. And other than that, the only thing that was completely not meaningless on the show was Jeff Hardy's return. He also came back, did an interview in the ring saying he wants to have one final run to right all of his wrongs and exercise all of his demons, which I can appreciate. But WWE really seems like one thing that makes me nervous about this is WWE really seems to be making Jeff Hardy's substance abuse problems and some of the demons he's had in his past, they seem to be making this a storyline, which in and of itself, I don't necessarily have a problem with. They've done that before with people, but I don't personally trust that Jeff Hardy is really cleaned up. It was only a year ago, less than that he was getting DUIs and shit, and he's been to rehab before. He's had help before, and he's relapsed every fucking time. So WWE seems to be very confident that Jeff Hardy's going to keep his head on straight this time, and they seem to be invested in a push for him. And I'm surprised, considering everything Jeff Hardy's gone through, the multiple wellness policy violations he's had, even in his previous run, some of the problems that he's had in his life. What makes WWE think that this is any different than the times before? And trust me, I love Jeff. I've known those Hardy Boy kids since they were literally kids. So I want to see Jeff get a grasp on this, and I hope that he does, because he's charismatic as fuck. I'd love to see him get another run with the belt. Would love it. Would have no problems with it at all, provided he can stay healthy. Provided he can stay healthy and he can stay focused and all of that. I am all on board and all in on a Jeff Hardy push. But part of me just wonders why this time is so different and why WWE is not exercising a little bit of caution here with how they proceed on his push, given all of his previous personal problems in the past. So we'll see. Best of luck to Jeff Hardy. His first opponent is going to be Sheamus. Sheamus said last week that he's going to be in the same building this week during Hardy's return, and he's going to confront him. So we knew exactly what was going to happen here. I called it out before it happened. I said, Jeff Hardy's going to come out to cut a promo. Sheamus is going to show up and attack him. Hardy will fight him off, and they'll set up a match. I thought they would add this last minute to Money in the Bank, but I have not seen that match advertised yet. So you guys let me know in the comments if I'm wrong about that. But I kind of thought they would just put the match together one-on-one at Money in the Bank. I guess they will probably save that for SmackDown, maybe next week. I don't know if they've announced that either. But Hardy will be facing Sheamus first. I'm assuming Hardy will get past him and begin his push. That leads to what? I don't know. But looks like they're going to try to do one more thing with Hardy, which is good. And that's really it. That's really the only important thing that happened on SmackDown. Everything else was meaningless tag team matches setting up Money in the Bank. We had Tamina and Lacey Evans taking on Sasha and Bayley. We had all 8 men in the Fatal 4-Way Tag Team title match, having a tag team match as well. I think it was Miz and Morrison and Forgotten Sons against New Day and Luchas. And then in the main event, we had Corbin and Corbin and Shinsuke, or Corbin and Cesaro against Otis and whoever the fuck. So I don't even remember. It was just some stupid... Daniel Bryan and Otis, I believe. Oh, no, 6-man. Daniel Bryan, Otis, and Gulak against Corbin, Shinsuke, and Cesaro. That's what it was, right? So again, just pointless match, just with some Money in the Bank competitors and all that shit. And in the end, I don't even remember what happened in that match, who won, DQ or what. But the ending was kind of telling, and the ending kind of served as a little bit of a relief for me, because they did the thing. They had all the ladders out there, and they had the briefcases hanging above the ring. So after the match, they're all brawling and fighting with each other, and they do a couple of funny spots. One was with Otis. Corbin gets a ladder first. He tries to climb up to get the briefcases, but Otis stops him, and then Otis goes around to the other side of the ladder, and he looks at it and goes, "Arr." And this is one of the reasons why I don't have really Otis picked to win, because I'm like, how can his big ass get up there? And they kind of explain that. They have the ladder there, and Otis steps on the bottom rung, and he breaks it right off. Now, these are obviously gimmicked, steps or whatever. He breaks it off. He tries to step on the next one, and that breaks through as well. So he basically breaks the ladder. He's too heavy to climb up the ladder, which is interesting. So after that, I think he gets taken out, and then the show goes off the air with Baron Corbin fighting off everybody, including Daniel Bryan and others. He climbs up to the top of the ladder, grabs the briefcase, and celebrates with the briefcase as the show goes off the air. Now, much like in the tag team match with the girls earlier on, Tamina getting the win over Bayley, that's going to be her win. And I feel like this is going to be Corbin's win. A lot of people, including myself, have been worried that Corbin is going to win the Money in the Bank. Up until last night, he was on my short list of the most likely to win. I thought that it would probably be him. He's a great heel. He's going to be all gimmicked up. He's going to have the King of the Ring, crown, and scepter. Now he's going to have a big green briefcase with him. It's going to be a whole lot of gimmicks, but Baron Corbin is the type of heel that really, most cases, is best for the briefcase just because of what douches they can be. But the fact that he got the last laugh and the last word last night on SmackDown makes me think that he will not be winning this briefcase, because you got to remember, this was already taped. So if he already won the briefcase on Sunday when they taped that, why would they have him? Why would they just double down on that and just really shove him up our asses? So with Corbin getting that moment on SmackDown, I felt it was the same as Tamina's moment, and that's going to be it for them. So that was the one good piece of news I feel like came out of SmackDown last night, and that's really all that happened. I guess the only other thing that we should mention is we did get another vignette for the Hacker. Still don't know who the Hacker is. We talked about him at the opening of the show here. I like the idea of Gable or Ali or both. I like the idea of Xavier Woods. I like the idea of CM Punk, even though it's not going to be him. I almost thought maybe it could be Randy Orton, but Randy Orton's going to be on Raw this week. He's advertised to be on the show with Edge. So I don't think it's him. Don't think it's really a new guy either, because I think it needs to be somebody that we recognize, not just some completely new star that they're bringing in or something. So this has got to be somebody that's already on TV, and I'll be happy to hear about other ideas for who the Hacker could be. I still think we're a ways off. Oh, Hardy and Cesaro is the pre-show match. Thank you for that, Ryan. Oh, yeah, and in terms of the Hacker, too, I feel like they've changed some things up. It was a female voice, you're saying, this time around, and I know some of the previous Hacker vignettes, the audio has been analyzed, and some people said, oh, this one was definitely Xavier Woods, this one was definitely Chad Gable. So WWE probably knows that fans are going to try to figure it out as well, so they're probably changing things up. I know the coordinates on the Twitter page for the Hacker has been changed several times. It was Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. The other one was something Phil, some town named Phil something in Texas, which, what is CM Punk's first name? Phil. They've done a couple of weird things to kind of tease us as to who it might be, but I think they're just throwing us off. And if they did a female's voice this time, I don't think that means it's going to be a female, but I'm open to it being one. And I said that right off the bat. This does not have to be a male. This could absolutely be a female. And if it is, I'd be cool with that. Mickie James would be weird. I think with the way the Hacker is being built up, I love Mickie James. Would love to see her back on TV. Would love to see her in something meaningful to do. But if it was Mickie James for me, I feel like it would be a letdown. Nothing against Mickie. I just think that I'd rather see it being somebody else. It can still be another woman. I just rather see, I don't know, a woman that might make more sense than Mickie James. I don't know, just a thought. So anyway, place your bets on who the Hacker is. That leaves us with Money in the Bank, and then I'm finally going to get out of here after 2.5 hours. I will post the audio to this on the website here in just a couple hours, by the way, so if you want to download the MP3, you can do that on my website, or you can catch it over there, Stitcher and iTunes and Google Podcasts and all that good stuff. Let's get into the Money in the Bank card now. Ryan was kind enough to inform me that Jeff Hardy and Cesaro is the pre-show match. Excuse me. Which I wasn't aware of, but obviously Jeff Hardy is going to win that match, so I predict him there. As far as the main card goes, the tag team Fatal 4-Way, we've got the Forgotten Sons taking on the New Day, taking on Miz and Morrison, taking on the Lucha Bros. Now, prior to last night, I probably would have picked Miz and Morrison to retain here, because I don't think they should have really lost the belts to begin with, but they got the victory in the tag match last night, I believe. Didn't Miz win with skull-crushing finale, if my memory serves? So I think I'm going to go New Day to retain. It is way, way too early to put the belt on the Forgotten Sons. I'd be insulted if they did that. I wouldn't care if they put them on the Lucha House Party. I just don't see why they would. So I'm going to pick the New Day to retain there. I'm also going to predict, well, I just realized this now that I'm saying it out loud. I have everybody retaining their titles here. But I definitely, excuse me, want to predict Bayley to retain over Tamina, because I still think there's just a deeper story being told there with Bayley and Sasha that'll eventually lead to the SummerSlam match or whatever. Real slow burn on this thing, but you can tell commentators are alluding to the heat between them and, you know, the animosity and all that stuff. So I think that's going to happen. And Tamina getting the win last night, she's not going to beat Bayley here. I thought maybe they could just randomly put the belt on Tamina, but it feels out of place, and Bayley, I think, has got to retain. Same goes for Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre taking on Seth Rollins. Rollins, we've speculated on. He could have a trick up his sleeve for sure. He could have some maybe new Monday Night Messiah recruits. Very possible. The AOP is on the shelf right now. All he's got to back him up is Buddy Murphy. He could have some other guys come out to help him out, but in the end, you don't beat Drew McIntyre yet. You could in both of these title matches. I don't think you need to see it in both, but in one of them for sure, I think a DQ is likely. And I think WWE could get away with a DQ here because you got so much going on in the Money in the Bank matches, which will probably close the show. I don't think either one of those title matches will close the show. So I think the duo Money in the Bank will do that. And there could be so much wacky shit going on that you'll completely forget about a DQ finish that might have pissed you off earlier on. And if it can get you out of the situation and continue the story, I really don't have an issue with a disqualification. So you could see a DQ finish here, but I don't think this is the match to do it in. I think the best one to do it in is the one after that, or the Universal title that I'm going to talk about in a minute. So I'm going to predict Drew McIntyre to Claymore and pin Seth Rollins. I still think you got to do another match between those two, though. So a clean win I am skeptical about a clean win. Maybe Drew wins with some help, but by accident or something like that. Maybe he cheats by accident, or Seth Rollins gets hit with a chair or something like that. I don't know. And allows Seth to challenge again, or you get a Monday Night Messiah rebirth with two new guys joining the fray and they attack and save Seth Rollins from being beat. That leads to the DQ or something. But I think you got to have Drew just win this match. He needs to beat a quality big opponent. Seth Rollins is one of the biggest stars in WWE currently, probably the biggest one in terms of, the main event status they are in. This guy owns multiple clean victories over Brock Lesnar. So that's a good opponent for Drew to beat. If he beats Brock at WrestleMania and then beats Seth in his first pay-per-view defense, it's not bad. That's not bad. So he's beaten some big people, and it looks like WWE is all in on Drew, and that makes me happy. So I think Drew will retain there. Strowman, I think, will somehow retain against Bray Wyatt. He also had, they did the segment last night on SmackDown as well, where Bray Wyatt presented him with the old mask that he wore when he debuted. They're still talking a lot about his history with the Wyatt family and all of that. And you've got Funhouse Bray in this match, not The Fiend. If it was The Fiend, I'd say just resume where you were before Saudi Arabia. Just hit the rewind button, pretend Saudi Arabia never happened, put the belt back on The Fiend, and let's wait for Roman to come back, kind of thing. But the fact that it's Bray Wyatt, to me, makes me think that Strowman is going to retain the belt. I don't think he's going to beat Bray. I don't think he's going to beat him. This is where I think we see the disqualification. I think we might see, how we saw, like double doinks back in the day? I think it's possible that we see an appearance by The Fiend. Just find somebody that has the same body type as Bray Wyatt. There aren't many of those people, but dress someone up as The Fiend who can come out and like maybe distract or scare Braun Strowman. That actually might be a good finish. If they did put the belt on Bray Wyatt here, you could have The Fiend showing up distracting Braun. What the fuck? And then Bray Wyatt's able to capitalize him on beat him. But I think if Wyatt is going to win the title, The Fiend would do it, not Funhouse Bray. So that's why I think Braun is going to escape here with the title somehow. I can't see Braun power slamming Bray and pinning him clean. If Braun was the plan the whole time and he was in the position that Roman Reigns was and he was scheduled to face Goldberg and beat him in the whole deal and get the Drew McIntyre treatment, then yeah, I might predict Braun to easily win his first title defense clean. But considering everything's going on with Braun and he's really they put the title on him because they had no other choice, I don't think he's going to be pushed and invested in the same way as Drew. So He'll walk out of Money in the Bank tomorrow with the title, but how does he do it? How does he win, or does he win? So I think a disqualification here is very likely, or some sort of a non-finish is very likely here. And if they did that, I wouldn't be upset. I wouldn't care, because I think we're going to see an absolutely bonkers men's and women's Money in the Bank matches. So I'm predicting Drew to win his match, Braun to potentially win, but probably by disqualification. That's what I'm picking. Either way, Braun carries the big blue belt out of Money in the Bank. Oh, thank you, Reese Jones. Thank you for that. MVP versus R-Truth was added randomly. Okay, so we've got that match as well. Let me just cruise over here to this. Because all I'm doing, what I'm looking at when I wrote down my notes earlier for the pay-per-view card, I was doing it off of the WWE's website. So if R-Truth, who'd you say? R-Truth and who? R-Truth and MVP. I'm going to pick MVP in that match if it does in fact happen, because MVP has been recruiting some help. And I think if he faces R-Truth, then you might see Shane Thorne and Vink maybe show up and help out MVP to win, something like that. All right. Oh, yeah. I click on WWE's website and I see Baron Corbin holding those two briefcases like a douche. Oh, yeah. I see it here. I see it now. Yep. MVP, R-Truth, Jeff Hardy, and Cesaro. Are those both kickoffs? No, it just looks like Jeff Hardy and Cesaro is. Yeah, all right. So R-Truth and MVP will be on the pay-per-view itself. So thank you guys for cluing me in on those other two matches. I was completely unaware of them. So that leaves us with the men's Money in the Bank match and the women's Money in the Bank match. And as we know, they will be taking place simultaneously. Now, word was also leaked that they have planned a roof spot. Somebody's fallen off this fucking roof. They've mentioned it a couple of times on TV. They wouldn't be mentioning this if they didn't do it. So, and apparently I think Becky Lynch revealed in some interview that Vince McMahon actually demonstrated the fall. So apparently 75-year-old Vince, however old he is these days, he is still performing these stunts. You know, remember he did Shawn Michaels. The plaque, you can't really see it. It's back there. WrestleMania 12, right up here in Anaheim. He went down the big zip line and demonstrated it before Shawn had to do it. It sounds like Vince is still doing this kind of stuff, and he took some bump off the tower. So I don't know what they're going to do or how it's going to be edited or what, but somebody's fallen off the roof. I really hope it's Baron Corbin. I have a feeling it will be, considering that he kind of got the last laugh on SmackDown. He's got so much heat with the audience. I think WWE might just want to do us a solid here and make the audience at home happy and throw that bald fucker off the roof. So I think that's going to happen to Baron Corbin. You got to kind of predict these at the same time. Now, here's the thing. I always do this every year. Excuse me, my nose is itching. I always do this every year with the Money in the Bank. I always say that it should probably be a division between a heel and a babyface and a SmackDown and a Raw. So in the men's field, you've got Daniel Bryan, Aleister Black, Rey Mysterio, Baron Corbin, Otis, and AJ Styles. Out of those six men, I would love nothing more than to see Aleister Black win. But I've been saying that, to me, the briefcase doesn't fit with him. I don't think it automatically means he needs to win it. I don't automatically think it means he's buried if he doesn't win it. I think he's badass enough, provided WWE continues to push him and make him look strong and rack up these victories. He is a guy that can earn a title shot without any briefcase. And plus, with McIntyre as your champion right now, Aleister Black, unless he jumps ship, I would love to see that. Now, if Aleister won the briefcase and jumped over to SmackDown and beat Braun Strowman for the title, fuck yeah. And then had a feud with Bray Wyatt, sign me up. Aleister Black and The Fiend in a title program, pass the lotion. So I'd be perfectly fine with that. But that's the only way I think I would accept Aleister Black winning the briefcase, because otherwise he's on Raw. You already got a strong babyface champion that's rolling there. Aleister would have to hold on to that briefcase for a long time, and I want the briefcase to be held onto for a long time, but I think a heel is a better guy to drag out the briefcase. Babyfaces tend to cash him in soon. Heels tend to toy with people. So to me, Aleister Black just doesn't fit as a briefcase holder. So I'm kind of ruling him out. But I think AJ would be a great briefcase holder, because like I said, AJ, much like Aleister Black, it would be great if he went over to SmackDown and beat Braun Strowman. Would love that. So... And I mentioned this too, like last week, one thing I said is that, you know, WWE, I don't think you can really do a one-night cash-in here. You know, it seems like it's impossible, because otherwise you have to admit that the Money in the Bank match was taped. Either that or your wrestlers have developed teleportation powers. Because if somebody wins that ladder match and then cashes in, means two things. Number one, the Money in the Bank matches are not going to be in the main event, but I think they will be, considering neither one of these title matches really need to be. So you'd have to do an awful lot to have a one-night cash in there. So you're not going to see that. I think these two matches will close the show. It'll be the last thing we see. It's got to be, especially when you hear about some of these stunts they have planned, like people falling off the roof and shit. So on the men's field, I'm trying to rule out people. Daniel Bryan, I would love it. Daniel Bryan would be one of the exceptions to the rule of a babyface that might be fun seeing with the briefcase. I don't see it. Rey Mysterio, same thing. Cinderella pick. Dark horse, one more run for Rey Mysterio. But again, I just don't see him winning the briefcase. Doesn't fit in the current landscape of things going on in WWE right now. Baron Corbin, I would have normally picked as one of my favorites, but after what he did last night, I'm kind of ruling him out. Leaves me down to two. I've eliminated Bryan, Alistair, Ray, and Corbin. We've got Otis, and we've got AJ. Otis, 1 week ago, Tito, or Bub, get down from there. My cat's on the counter. 1 week ago, I speculated and I talked about the potential or the possibility of Otis winning the briefcase, and I said no. I said he's not ready. It's way too early. He's in the middle of this other storyline with Dolph and Mandy and all of this. He would be hilariously entertaining. You talk about a babyface that would be entertaining with that briefcase, he would be the best. He could carry snacks in there. He could carry potato chips and crackers and Oreos in that briefcase when he came out to the ring. I could see him when Mandy's having a match, he can have the briefcase with him. He can sit at ringside while she's having her match, and he can open it up and he can have snacks and food and fucking a steak, and he's eating it with a knife. I would love to see that. So he would be highly entertaining. So he's now jumped to the front of the line as my pick of somebody that might actually win it. Again, though, this would have to be, I feel like Otis is really, this storyline has really been over, but in the last couple of weeks, I think he's really fallen into favor with a lot of fans. So this can't be like a spur of the moment decision because like we talked about, they've already filmed this weeks ago. So they would have had to see this coming a long time ago, which makes me skeptical on Otis winning. But they did the thing last night where he broke the ladder. So that makes me think the fact that Otis couldn't get up that ladder and he was breaking off the steps of it, it makes me think that he can get creative because they are at Titan Towers, they're at headquarters. There's going to be all sorts of toys and props for them to use. I think if Otis does wind up retrieving the briefcase, he uses something else. He gets some sort of other apparatus to get up there. What? I have no fucking idea. Maybe they bring a helicopter in and it flies him up there. I don't know what he's going to do, but I think Otis could find a creative way since they kind of, in storyline, made it seem like he can't climb up a ladder without breaking it. That might turn into a way for him to find a unique way to get up and retrieve the briefcase and win the match. If it's not Otis, then I got to pick AJ. I think AJ, it's either going to be AJ or Otis. So if you notice, that's one heel and one babyface. So those are my top two on the men's side. On the women's side, we got Nia Jax, Shayna Baszler, Asuka, Dana Brooke, Lacey Evans, and Carmella. It seems obvious to us it's going to be a Raw girl. Becky Lynch is going to confront the briefcase holder on Raw, which means if it's Dana Brooke, that makes no fucking sense. So I'm ruling out Dana, Lacey, and Mella because I think they're all weak, and they're not to the level of the other three Raw people are. And I know Nia Jax, nobody likes her and everything, but she's got more experience than the other girls. She's won a title at WrestleMania, that kind of stuff. She's done bigger things. So her resume is stronger than Dana, Lacey, and Mella. Shayna and Asuka are who they are. Now, my number one pick out of all six of these women is Asuka. She, much like Otis, that would be my ultimate dream. Asuka and Otis. Your two briefcase holders, both of them batshit crazy baby faces and could be hugely entertaining with the briefcase, especially Asuka. Asuka is my number one pick. I want her to win this so bad so she can come out there with that briefcase every week and screaming and dangling her face. You never know what she's going to do. She's so unpredictable. She's so good. She's been very animated lately. She's been talking. She's been dancing. She's been singing. She would be fun, just like Otis would. But if it's not going to be Asuka, it's got to be Shayna Baszler. I don't want to see it be Nia Jax any more than I want to see it be Corbin. But Nia Jax, you got to think, why would she should have the same problem that Otis has, right? Because if Otis is trying to climb up the ladder and he breaks it, Nia is going to break her ladder too. She's just as big as Otis. So it feels like Otis not being able to climb up there should automatically disqualify Nia. So plus I don't want to see it be Nia anyway. So my two picks for the women are Shayna on the heel side, Asuka on the babyface side. On the men's side, I've got AJ on the heel side, Otis on the babyface side. So it can only be one or the other, right? So I don't think it's going to be two heels, and I don't think it's going to be two babyfaces. And I'm curious how the finishes are going to be. Are they going to happen simultaneously? Are we going to have a girl and a guy on the ladder together, retrieving the briefcases together? Or are we going to get one finish first, followed by the next one? Don't know. So it's either got to be Otis or AJ and Shayna or Asuka. So, well, fuck. I might say this. I'm going to make a bold prediction. You know, why not? Why not? Why not? What's the worst that can happen, right? My picks are going to be Otis and Shayna. I think if Otis wins, that gives us the fun, crazy babyface winning the briefcase, and it also gives us a no-nonsense, ass-kicking heel as a briefcase holder. So that's my pick. Now, it could also be AJ and Asuka. I think I'd almost rather see AJ and Asuka because I love the idea of AJ jumping ship and taking on Strowman for the title. So if it turns out to be Asuka winning in the women's side, then I think it's got to be a heel on the men's, which it could be AJ Styles. But in the end, I'm going to pick Otis or Shayna. So those are my two picks, Otis and Shayna. And if it's not them, I think it's going to be AJ and Asuka. So yeah, I can't believe I'm picking Otis. 1 week ago, I would have said no way. But the more and more I think about it, man, he sure as shit would be fun. You know, and the cool thing too about Otis, most of the time when you win the briefcase, it's like a guarantee that you're going to win the title. I don't think it has to be that way with Otis. I think he could win the briefcase, hold on for it a while, hold on to it for a while. And I've been talking about how something has got to be going on with Otis and Mandy and Dolph and all these people. Something major has got to happen here. So I think Otis could win the briefcase. And then when he cashes in the briefcase, you get Mandy turning on him. Or you get some sort of an interference from Mandy. Maybe Tucker turns on him. Mandy or Tucker, I think, if Otis wins the briefcase, should turn on him in his title match, costing him the title. And then that can set him on a path to feud with them. You know, and Ziggler is still involved in this too. Dolph Ziggler could show back up. Dolph Ziggler and Mandy Rose could collectively cost Otis the title match when he cashes in the briefcase and then make out right in front of him. Heartbreaking poor Otis. So something like that. So I can't believe I'm predicting Otis. I think I'm only predicting him because why the hell not? It's a crazy time. Might as well make some crazy predictions. But if he did win, he's one of the very few baby faces that I could stomach as the briefcase holder because he would be funny. He would be so funny. Asuka would be funny. Shayna would not be funny. Shayna would be no nonsense, deliberate, and quite boring, to be honest. But I still think she does make some sort of sense, especially, you know, in her current situation and feud with Becky Lynch, and the fact that Becky is supposedly going to confront the briefcase holder on Raw. All signs to me point to Shayna. That's what I think. So we'll see. Just to recap, I've got Hardy over Cesaro. I've got MVP over R-Truth. I've got the New Day retaining the tag team titles. I got Bayley retaining the SmackDown Women's title, Drew McIntyre retaining the WWE title, and Braun Strowman somehow, likely by DQ, retaining the Universal title. And I've got Otis and Shayna winning their respective Money in the Bank briefcases. We'll see. Hope you guys can join me tomorrow for our live reaction. It's going to be a hoot. Just cruise back to the chat, answer a couple of questions and super chats, and then I'm going to get out of here. 3-hour podcast. My God, what's going on? Anyway, Jordan Smith, thank you very much, brother, for the $10. Is a second stimulus a good idea? $2,000 every month and $2,000 for every child for 6 months and 3 months after it's over. Nobody will want to go back to work. P.S. How mad if Corbin and Nia both win? Corbin and Nia will definitely not both win. There's no way WWE would do that. But it would be pretty crazy. The internet would explode. I haven't read any details on a second stimulus, and those numbers seem quite large. I think there's some people like with me, like the stimulus and the unemployment, all that does is have me barely break even. But there are some people who are getting paid a lot more being out of work than they would being in work. And those are the ones that I worry about in their motivation to go back to work. Some people are probably loving sitting on their ass. You know, people, have shit jobs or are lazy or scumbags and do drugs and, are just not responsible people, get to sit on their ass right now and collect all this money that they would never have earned out there in the real world. But then there's other, people who are responsible and do work hard that actually need it. So, it's one of those things, there are a lot of people who like oppose welfare. Well, some people spend their money on like an Xbox. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure there are people that do that, but there are a lot of people that also need it. So you can't let a couple of bad apples ruin it for everybody. But, none of that stuff, stimuluses or anything like that, none of that will last forever. So some people might see all those dollars coming in and say, oh, I don't have to work, but that money will run out, and it will not be coming to you forever. And eventually you are going to have to work. And by then you might have burned your bridges or fucked up. So I don't know, Jordan. It just depends. I'll have to see the details on the next stimulus. When and if it comes. I'm sure that it will, but the details on it, I don't know. But that's one thing I will say about, at least here in the States, I'm not sure where it is around everywhere else, but when they passed that Federal CARES Act, which added $600 a week on top of everybody's unemployment that they were already getting, that saved a lot of people. That saved me, because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to live off the unemployment. So I think that it's good that we were taken care of, and that on top of the fear of just being out and being safe and being healthy, you don't have the financial fear on top of that. And there's a lot of financial fear out there, small business owners and people that weren't able to get help from the government. There's a lot of people in a lot of struggling turmoil right now, but I also think it's recoverable. And for the most part, a lot of people are going to be able to get back on their feet when all this is over. But if another stimulus comes through, hell yeah. And if you have children, that would be nice to get that kind of money every month for a little while. But yeah, it is going to pose a problem for the people who might not want to go back to work and, and all that. I've never been unemployed in my life. I don't know what it's like to sit around for this long. So it's been kind of freaky to me. But at the same time, I'm in my 40s and I've never not worked. I've been working, balls to the wall ever since I was 15 without any breaks. So I am enjoying kind of hitting the reset button and recharging my batteries a little bit. But still, I could never imagine doing this all the time. I got to get back to work. I got to get back up and get out in the sunshine and talk to people and move around and get blood moving through my veins, So even if the government paid you, I feel like I'd still want to get up and do something, and I wouldn't want to sit on my ass all the time. But luckily, I got you guys to fall back on. I got YouTube to keep me busy and keep me occupied, and it also acts as a second job. So I could definitely have it a lot worse. I'm very happy with the way that it worked out, and I'm in the restaurant business, so there's a lot of unanswered questions in the future, and I could be staring down the barrel of some very difficult times in the future, but at least for right now and the weathering of the COVID storm, I'm doing just fine. So I hope you guys too. I hope all you guys are too. And there's some people that are doing a lot better than they normally would have been had this not happened. So yeah, actually my stimulus has not come either, because I had something wrong with this tax return and my numbers aren't matching up. So they have to deposit mine in my account, but I haven't gotten it yet. But luckily I'm not desperate for it, and hopefully it'll just come down the road. It'll be a nice little chunk of money. Oh, look at that. $1,200 for Greg. Merry Christmas. I didn't know about that either, Ryan wrote it. Any thoughts on AEW wrestlers and UFC fighters at the same hotel after a UFC fighter tested positive for the virus? UFC has had, I believe, 3 positive tests now. Wasn't aware of that. But, oh yeah, and that's what I wanted to mention about AEW, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Ryan. This will probably be my parting thought before I get out of here. One huge compliment I want to give AEW is how real they are keeping it, and I much more appreciate a company like them who is being honest and open and just plain real about the COVID-19 stuff. WWE, the only time they mention it is when they jack themselves off about their philanthropy, like they did last night on SmackDown. WWE is partnering with so-and-so to help those in need in the pandemic, which is all great, but the only reason they're mentioning it at all is so they can brag about, their charity. Where AEW, they were up front during the show. We're back. We're social distancing. We're following guidelines. We are staying safe. And they're actually acknowledging the COVID-19 pandemic, acknowledging the times that we're in right now, and just keeping it real. And I can't tell you, just from a standpoint from a fan, how much I appreciate a wrestling company not trying to blow smoke. Because WWE, they are so micromanaged in every single word that comes out of the commentator's mouth to maximize their image at all costs. And a lot of times they don't even really bring up the virus. They don't talk about Roman Reigns. They don't talk about anything. The only time they ever even bring up the virus or acknowledge it exists is when they kind of word it funny. Vince probably has some memo. Don't mention the virus. Call it the circumstances or something like that. Where AEW just kept it real. They talked about testing. They even said that all of their talent is getting tested, not just temperature taken, but tested for coronavirus. That's great. That they're implementing testing and all of that. So just hearing them talk about that on Wednesday, I'm like, oh, it's so nice to hear a wrestling company not blow fucking smoke up your ass like WWE does constantly. And it's something that as an adult, I can appreciate more about AEW than WWE, because WWE is so methodical and deliberate in how they say things and how they word things and how they completely just try to make themselves look as good as possible to an absolutely sickening level. It just gets so old. So I really appreciated AEW doing that. And if they were staying in the same hotel as another UFC fighter, I don't know what you really want them to do, just cancel all their shows. But if they are testing everybody, then I think that's acceptable enough, because there's still, no matter what, there's going to be a risk. Every time you go into the grocery store, every time you go fill up with gas, every time you leave your house, even if you're just going out, you can still contract it somehow, just with people or touching something or who knows, so no matter what you do, you're taking a risk. And I think as long as you are as safe as possible, follow the guidelines, of the CDC, and test and just be safe, life can resume, just with as minimal risk as possible, instead of just being an asshole and saying, I'm just going to go out without my mask and blah, blah, blah. That's just a douchey thing to say. It's a douchey, self-absorbed thing to say, because you're putting other people at risk because you're being a dick. That's not fair. So I don't know. I think, I'm actually happy with how AEW is handling the virus. And I don't know, I wasn't aware that they were staying in the same hotel as UFC fighters. I was aware of UFC's positive tests. I also saw that UFC was making their fighters sign a fucking agreement. This is a very WWE thing to do. Sign an agreement not to criticize how they handled the safety guidelines of the coronavirus in the UFC. Can you believe that? God damn. So I know that show's going on right now, right? The UFC, but ooh, that's a good idea too, Ryan Rhoda. So I don't know. I'm not worried too much about AEW right now. If anything, I'm comfortable with how they're handling everything. That's a good idea, Ryan. That is a good way to get out of that match, because I am not sure, even though I think Drew should win and beat Seth, is just beating Seth completely clean right in the middle of the ring in the first title defense something that WWE wants to do if you want it to lead to a rematch. So if you do have Murphy accidentally costing Seth the match, that could set up a rematch against Drew, or could also set up a match with with Seth and Murphy. So yeah, that's an excellent way to get out of that match while still leaving the door open for a rematch. I kind of like your idea there. Wouldn't be surprised at all, Ryan, if that's the exact finish they go with. Murphy running out there, getting involved. Drew takes him out, and then eventually Seth loses anyway. I can totally see that happening. Anyway, I am out of gas. We have been going for 3 hours now. I have to eat something and do something. Do something other than talk wrestling, and probably work on some of my videos, including my live stream that I have planned for this week, and get tomorrow's live reaction ready and all of that. So be sure to join me on the channel tomorrow. Tonight, here in probably just a couple of hours, I will post the link to tomorrow's live reaction or tomorrow's watch along to Money in the Bank. And I'll also be posting the audio to this podcast up on my website. It should be up in just a couple of hours. And so check back. I want to thank you guys for hanging out for an extremely long podcast. This is definitely the longest Winged Eagle I've done so far. Haven't done a 3-hour episode yet. I think last week we went 2.5. This week we went 3. So I appreciate you guys sitting with me tonight, chatting with me tonight, going through all of this news and all these wrestling results. One of the most loaded episodes I've ever had, but it was a lot of fun. You guys have a great rest of your night, and I will catch you tomorrow for a Money in the Bank live reaction. It's going to be fun. Y'all be good. Peace.